Welcome, everyone, to the fourth episode of the Before the Tones Drop podcast. I'm your host, Ben Moorhead. We just got done recording with George Lindblade. George is not only one of the most fascinating humans that I've ever met, but I'm pretty confident he will be one of the most fascinating humans I'll ever meet. We had a great talk today, everything from the Sioux City Fire Department, photography, filmography. You're going to hear names like Sinatra and Kennedy and fire chiefs with the Sioux City Fire Department, all in one big conversation. So we hope you guys like it. Take a listen. There's a lot in here. It's a lot of good stuff. So sit back, relax, grab a cup of coffee, and enjoy today's episode.
We know one of the guys that works that show, and we have personally called him and said, "Are you out of your mind? Do you not have a technical representative on the set that is a firefighter or knows anything about what you're doing?" They don't. The real story is more exciting than what you're putting out, and and it is. It's just like when I go out and shoot a fire. If you ever notice any of the stuff I put up, I don't shoot a lot of the building burning. I'm shooting the guys working. Because that's where the story's at. And you can tell it by the expression on their face, the way they handle themselves. That's the story. And over the years, I've found that, believe it or don't, a lot of your wives, girlfriends, and kids comment on those pictures. And that's where the story is how you guys address it. And, I've never been at a fire where the flame is 3 feet off and it's propane. You can tell it's propane. And, that's show business and people like it, I guess. So as long as the ratings go up, they don't care.
Right.
We think, when we watch the webcam stuff that comes out, like the helmet cams
Yes.
that they put out, we think that's great, but
Yeah.
you can't see anything 90% of the time, but you know what they're doing.
Right.
But that doesn't make for good television, right?
Oh, no.
It's Hollywood. Yeah, it is over dramatized. Backdraft still. It's kind of one of my favorite
that's real.
movies.
That was one of my favorite documentaries put out.
It was.
That was pretty good.
But I will say, as far as actual fire movies with structural. I think Ladder 49. Of all the ones that I've seen, Ladder 49 probably came the closest for, I think, interactions in the firehouse, and then. It's like the first call when Joaquin Phoenix's character gets his first fire, after, and he forgets his helmet and he's just amped up and just running and doing all this stuff. And then the officers, the officers behind him, telling him, guiding him with the hose line. He's just, I said, that's out of any fire movie that I've ever seen, that's probably the most real sequence, I think, of anything. Where you just that first fire and you're on the hose line, you're just.
The other thing that is badly portrayed is firehouse life. What goes on in the firehouse?
Yeah, it makes us look like a bunch of. I mean, we are kind of degens, but
No. I mean, it's there's a lot of vanity in each firehouse, and I've never noticed that either. I've been to a lot of firehouses, but. Again, they're giving the people what they expect and what they want to see, and everybody lives happily ever after. But
I think we're more Tacoma FD than Chicago Fire in the firehouse.
Right.
That's probably more accurate. You talk about Ladder 49.
Yeah.
They Rescue Me. I was like Rescue Me.
Yep. I thought that was really good. I thought just the Rescue Me, the interactions between the firefighters and the conversations that they had, and the stuff in the fire. That's what I thought. Not so much what they're doing on the fire ground or the fires themselves, but just that interaction, those relationships. Some of those shows do a pretty good job of that part of it. But like I said, that's where watching Tacoma FD and some of the conversations and things they have, I'm like, that really happens. That's the most real. Some of the most ridiculous things. You're like, yep, no, that was last Tuesday. So
the other thing is too is when they're going to a fire. There's never any traffic on the street. They're never never fighting an intersection or some old lady that panicked and stops right in front of you or any of that. None of that, But they should come out here. We'll show them how it's done.
There we go.
Yeah. Are there jobs to be a consultant on shows like this?
Oh yeah. Well, see, interesting thing about, and I can only talk about Los Angeles because I live there. 90% of the firefighters belong to the Screen Actors Guild.
Yeah.
And they actually use them on a set, and especially if they're operating equipment, because there used to be, I don't know how it is today, but when I lived out there was a guy that he was a firefighter, he would buy all the old equipment. and refurbish it, and then he'd rent it back to the movie industry.
Mhm.
And he was originally from Lamar's, Iowa.
That's right.
And he, made a fortune off of it. And I was on an airplane with him one day, and I didn't know he was, and he introduced himself. And he says, yep, he says, 2 months ago I turned in this badge, and he handed his fire department badge, and they picked up this one. This is the one, the phony ones that they use on the thing. But he made a fortune doing that. And, it took some money to buy some of that old equipment. But
Good investment then.
But when he had a pump operator, the pump operator knew what to do. If you had an aerial, the guy knew what to do. It wasn't somebody's imagination. Well, maybe if I do this with it, don't put the outriggers out. Nobody will ever notice until it goes through the roof, But I don't know that they're trying to save money on them anymore because sometimes, the shows would cut back on this advisor or that guy, but anymore they won't allow it because of OSHA and everything else. You've got to, you got to be really on top. And now with COVID, to do a motion picture now, the average guy thinks there's one guy behind the camera. There's 6. I don't care if it's video or if it's film. There's 6 people standing around that camera. Well, now they all have to be plasticed up and masks and all the rest of it still today. And you have to have at least 2 certified COVID techs on your set to make sure that you're wearing your mask and you've had your shots and you're standing 6 feet away. And
So they're still pretty strict out there.
Yeah, they're
so that's
really
stuff.
on top of it.
Gotcha. Today there won't be too much of that. We got an awesome guest today, George Lindblade. Not a guy in the fire department that doesn't know you. Now, I don't know about Sioux City, but you've seen and lived a lot of life, and we're here to talk to you today. We had a pre-podcast meeting a few weeks ago. We kind of just put a quarter in you and let you start going.
That's me.
And that's kind of what we'd like to do today.
Okay.
And so, George, why don't we just start at the beginning? I can't think of a better place.
Well, in the beginning, I came from a law enforcement family. My grandfather essentially my grandparents raised me, and he was a police captain, so I grew up with it. I can't remember a day that we didn't have some type of a device in the house to tune in on what was going on in the community, so I guess that's why I am where I am. But I was the first cameraman that KTIB had on the air, and I got smitten by it. I got in the rut, and so here I am at 85 years old still doing it. And I've traveled most of the world. I've been in virtually every place, and every place I go, I always wind up at a fire station. Sometimes nobody speaks English, but there is a common ground if you've been around enough fire stations that there's a universal language wherever you go. And that includes the Amazon to the Barrow, Alaska, to China, to Hong Kong, to you name it, I've been there. And everybody seems to speak firehouse, so I'm putting that out for any firefighters that are traveling. You've always got a brother, no matter where there's a fire station. So, other than that, I've chased a lot of fire trucks in a lot of countries, and it's all the same. Put the fire out. That's the main cause of you being there. So, and I've enjoyed every minute of it. So, if anybody's got questions, I'll come up with an answer.
I guess, George, maybe at what age did you kind of pick up that first camera? Because I think growing up, you had mentioned before in our meeting and stuff that you lived by Old Station 4, correct?
Well, no, that was later in life.
Okay.
I grew up where Fire Station 1 is, at 313 9th Street.
Okay.
So, and first camera I had, I was 7 years old. And the first fire was Marty's Shack, which was right around the corner, right across from what's now the Boys Club. At that time, it was an armory. But so Marty's Shack caught fire. It was a little beer joint and burnt to the ground. So that was my first time out on a solo job, taking pictures of it at 7. Then my next fire was the Unitarian Church that burnt down at 10th and Douglas Street. And that was quite interesting because even then, in those days, the city was resurfacing the streets, and they had poured oil on the street, the asphalt oil, and they were concerned that the burning steeple was going to fall in and set Douglas Street on fire. So that made for some good pictures. And then it was just, after that, it was just wherever there was a fire and I could get to it, I'd go. But things have changed in the fire service, and most of them, I would say, is for the best, especially with the new turnout gear. The old boys used to wear rubber coats, and most of the helmets came from the Navy, because when people got out of the military, they gave them a pair of boots and a hat and said, you can go apply for a fire job, and that was the GI Bill, I guess, in those days. But anyway, the old days were pretty primitive. Nobody wore any SCBAs, because that was an assault on your manhood if you couldn't go in and the smoke until you couldn't stand up anymore, and then that was that you'd made your self-worth known to the rest of the firefighters that you could take it. Thank God things have changed.
Yeah.
And hopefully they'll keep changing for the better. There's a lot of room for improvement in turnout gear, as we all know, and breathing apparatus and such as that. But nevertheless, you guys have quite a heritage to live up to.
Well, thanks to you, we have it basically all documented. I mean, you're like not only like the city historian, but our fire department's I mean, everything we have is because of you, basically.
Well, we try, and we, like I said, the public is always interested. There is not one person that won't be curious if a fire truck goes by, where the fire truck's going. And being out there on the public side of things, a lot of times they'll say, well, there's no fire. Why is that fire truck out there? Well, they do EMS, they do hazardous material, they do all kinds of things, and sometimes people forget that you guys do all those things. And I think that reflects, too, in recruiting, because an average guy knows nothing about the fire service, is reluctant to apply for it, because they sit around, they say, all they do is sit around and play cribbage. Well, they did at one time. But the thing is that they don't understand. You're a teacher, you're a medic, you're an engineer, you're a firefighter, and really firefighting is way down the ladder. You're doing all these other things too, and I think that young people knew the expanse of the knowledge and the things that you do, there'd be more people interested in doing it. Plus, let's face it, you got that day off every once in a while, and that helps. You can always have a side job.
Yeah, and we can like do podcasts and stuff, and
Do
sit down and talk to
podcasts
guys
and all
like
that.
you and learn more
Yeah.
than we'd ever think. So.
But no, I think it's somewhat underestimated as a career opportunity, and anybody that comes across my place. In fact, I did have a situation up on 18th Street. Two people I knew. The one had graduated from Iowa State University, and the other one was headed for medical school at Iowa. It was a girlfriend-boyfriend situation at the time, and they just came up to me and wanted to know what each one of you fellows was doing at this particular fire, and I was explaining it all to them and let it go and forgot about them. And next thing I know, they're in El Paso, Texas. Both of them joined the fire department down there. And then now the two of them moved to the Dallas Fire Department, became captains on the fire department.
Wow.
And the guy's wife contracted cancer and passed away, but he's still a captain on the fire department. But, and again, I had some parents saying, well, my son would have been a doctor, but you interfered. But that's all right. He's enjoying his life, but I think that's the big thing, is to get that message out that you do more than play cribbage. And
Yeah.
Definitely.
So you've always been interested in capturing the stories. When you were, younger, we were talking a few weeks ago. You didn't stand on the side and take photos like you do now.
No.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
No, Ed Porter, who's another person I suggested maybe you want for your podcast. He and I used to, we'd ride in with you. And of course, in those days, people weren't looking over your shoulder like they are now. But we had turnout gear. The first turnout gear we got was given to us by, I think it was John Hill, who was chief. He said, if you're going to do this, got dressed like it and gave us the turnout gear. But yeah, we used to go in with them. I got blown out of the front door of the, I think it was a place called, was a restaurant in South Sioux City. I can't even remember where we're in, but when people talk about flashover and stuff, I know what they're talking about. And again, that goes back to what I watch on these situation shows now. When the place blows up, it's not like in the movies. You have chairs and furniture and crap all over that you didn't know when you went in there was in your way, but certainly is in your way when you're getting out. But it was a different time. But that's where you got the best pictures. I mean, if you're over the shoulder of the guy on the nozzle, you're going to get the best picture.
Oh, for sure.
Absolutely.
And times change, and it's good the way we do it now. But again, every once in a while I get yelled at by some news guy saying, "Why can you do that and I can't?" And I told one the other day, I said, "When you do it for 65 years, you can do it too, you know." But
Well, and George is, if you guys didn't realize, George, Chief presenting at one of the award ceremonies and stuff, Chief did present you with the helmet.
Oh,
You are the department's official photographer.
right, I am.
So
yeah.
George gets a little bit more.
I don't wear the helmet because it's too heavy, and it also has a brim on it that you can't take good pictures. You gotta have one that doesn't have it on there. But I got a hard head, so another example of being too close was the Carroll Apartments fire on Jackson Street, and the only reason I didn't get skinned up in that one is I was standing right at the corner of the building when it blew up. And I was in a perfect situation because the front of the building went one way and the side wall went the other way. And Gene Ambrosian, who was a reporter for KTIV, when it started to go, it made a puffing sound, and he turned his back to it. Well, unfortunately, his whole entire backside was fragmented with little pieces of glass. Which he didn't know until he got back to the newsroom, and he suddenly stood up and his chair was covered with blood, and the next thing he was on his way to the hospital.
Wow.
But things happen, and under the adrenaline rush of the moment, you forget about it until till you start bleeding on the floor. Then you wonder, well, why did I do that?
Who's
But
bleeding all over?
yeah. But yeah, it's been fun. It's been a fun time. I now set a limit for myself. If it's below 30 degrees, I don't go, unless it's a second alarm, and then I'll go. But other than that, yeah, I try to get to all of them.
Yeah.
Well, and there's some fires that in incidences we've had that you've been the only one, not just one there, but you've been the only one that's been there.
Yeah.
Especially at night, that you've been, the only one to come show up, and it's to document some of these things and take some of these pictures and stuff. And if had you not been there to do that, there's I think some of the times, some of the things that we go to, it's almost like we're special operations, like in the military, because we go in the middle of the night, and just the incident that we deal with, and if nobody came out, so if you didn't come out, if the news media or anybody, nobody knows we were there, and then we disappear back to the firehouse. The next day, people show up and they're like. Yeah. Like nothing happened. So it's it's nice when we see somebody out there, because that shows. Not only does it document it for us for some instances that we could go look back later, but it shows it shows the public the things that we do when they don't see what we're doing.
Well, that brings me back to another subject. Is in Los Angeles now, and I compare it to that. All the engines have paramedic written on the side of it, and I think that's a good idea. I think they should carry more insignia on it so that people maybe get an idea that you're going to do more than put out a fire or clean up gas and or antifreeze off an accident. If you don't tell the public what you're doing, the public's not going to find out. And a lot of things, like I talked for years about carrying the Local 7 sticker on the front of the rig too. I think it's important. I think it's first the people need to know you're a professional organization, you're professional firefighters. And just as professional as the doctor or the dentist or the lawyer down the street. You dedicate your life to this stuff, and if you don't think it, talk to the retirees. They still live every fire that they've ever been to. And most professions don't do that. I mean, you know, it's a way of life. Your family's part of that way of life. Your neighbors are part of that, your way of life, because they know the fireman that lives next door. I can go always get him, he'll help. And you know, it's something to be proud of.
One of the best lines from any movie was from Backtracks with Donald Sutherland when he said, you know, the funny thing about firemen is night or day they're always firemen. And
That's
I think
right.
that carries the truth not just for
That's right.
us in our like way of life and stuff, but that carries it for your neighbor. Like that's how you recognize it. People know you're a firefighter. That's how you're recognized,
Absolutely.
no matter what. And that's
Yeah.
something, you know, as professionals and stuff that we do have to kind of carry that, but be cognizant of that all the times, and you know, our behavior off the job and stuff. And some people might say, well, this is on the job, off the job, but you will be recognized as Sioux City firefighter Devin Shipper for the rest of your life. You know, that's it. I mean, you are,
Exactly.
you know, you are a firefighter, and you know, so it's an
I
important
can't
thing.
remember the guy's name from the New York Fire Department that's an actor now. And he went back when the Twin Towers went down and
Oh, that's Steve Buscemi.
yeah, put on his gear and went back to work.
Yep.
You know, how many people would do that? I mean, it takes a special breed of cat. And but you have that. You know, the old guys, I think if you threw them a pair of gloves and a coat, they'd jump right in there too if they could. Even if they couldn't, they'd try it. You know? So, but and there's not too many professions like that.
No.
You can find a retired carpenter and throw him a hammer and he'll throw it back at you.
Yeah, I don't know if I see a bunch of dentists hanging out, like
No,
just checking
no,
each
not
other's
really.
teeth.
Well-
we pulled a tooth there on 22nd Street a couple years ago.
Talking
Yeah.
about that, you know, when I lived out there, we had our brush fires and forest fires and whatever you called it. And I used to go up to the airport at Hemet, California. That's where a lot of they called them borate bombers then flew out of. Most of those guys that were flying the borate bombers were doctors and were dentists and were lawyers that had been in the military and kept up their licenses. And if a fire call came, they went and flew borate bombers and loved it. I mean, they were like kamikaze pilots. You know?
Wow.
And sometimes we'd go up there and film them. It was film in those days, loading the bombers and going out. And sometimes they wouldn't dump the load. Well, if you don't dump it, you got to get rid of it. You can't land the aircraft with that much weight on it. And so they would go out and every one of them at the end of the runway would do some stunt. He'd do some roll around or something to show that he was large and in charge, and then dump his load out at the end. But I always, I said to a couple of them, I said, "You mean you walk out of your dental practice?" Oh, hell yes, yeah, anytime. He says, you know, if the call came out, they were there and fly, and they do on their own airplanes, you know. But, yeah, there's a special breed of cat out
Yeah. So George, you said, is it 65 years you said you've been doing this?
there. Yeah, at least.
At least.
Yeah.
Maybe more.
Yeah.
A couple. If, you know, there's other people that come to our fires. We have the news, Siouxland Scanners, another one that,
Oh, yeah.
you know, he's always there. Any advice to some of these people, or maybe people in the future, on
Oh.
how to develop relationships?
I have a lot
and,
of advice.
you know, maybe, you know, yeah, developing those relationships to, you know, like how do you do this, but I can't do it, to maybe, you know, one day
Yeah,
achieve a fraction of George Lindblade's status.
Well, number one, I never park anywhere near the fire scene. I always park a block away for a couple of reasons. Number one, I don't want to get hemmed in by a bunch of fire hose. And number two, I want to stay out of the way. That's the other thing. Learn to stay out of the way. And you only learn that, I think, the hard way. But stay out of the way. If you get knocked on your butt by a hose or you trip over something, that's your fault. It's not their fault. You're on their territory. And know what to look for. Watch the smoke. Watch what's happening. listen to the building. The buildings make noise. And you guys are probably not even aware of it. You will be if you do it long enough. They always let out noise. You know what's going on. And you have to think ahead of it. And just because everybody's standing in front, there's a back door, something might be happening back there, go check, you know. It's getting a feel. It's like, I always say it's like being part of a stage play. This is a big play that's going on. This is a big scenario. How do you fit into it? Well, you don't fit into it. You're an observer. You're the bug on the wall. You're there, but you're not there. And a lot of people say, well, you weren't there, were you? And yeah, I was there. I was standing right next to you. But that's it. You're not part of it. You're recording it. And you got to keep that in mind. I don't care what you do. If you go to a political meeting and you're shooting it, you're not part of it. You're there to record it for somebody that can't be there, that can't see it. And so keep that in mind. And not everybody knows what you know about it, so you have to tell them what, through visually, through the camera, what they're supposed to be seeing, or what they should be seeing.
You can talk about that a little more. You know, a lot of people might see some of your photos or videos and they see guys standing out front. It doesn't mean they're not doing anything.
That's right.
They're constantly observing and stuff like you said, because that having those sets of eyes is huge, especially even through your lens.
Yeah,
to show people
that's the whole thing. You can't put it out unless you see it, and so you gotta have that time. And the other people, most people don't realize how much that equipment you wear weighs and what that does to you physically. Now, I've got a son-in-law that's a firefighter in Riverside County, and he put a thermocoupler in his gear one time, and the heat that builds up just from your body and your exertion and all is tremendous. And with the new turnout gear, you can't get rid of that sweat. You can't get rid of that, and that's part of it that's weighing on you. It's the same way with policemen. They wear so much junk anymore. How can they possibly chase anybody when they're carrying 45, 50 pounds of stuff and trying to jump a fence? It's ridiculous. They need bearers to carry that crap, you know. And same way with the SCBA's, they've got to come up with a better way of doing it than they have. Those tanks are just too big. I mean, they're too bulky. And I don't know what the answer is, but I do know there's supposedly research going on to make stuff smaller. But I remember one time they bought a couple deal. In fact, they're out there at Fours, a couple rebreather type things that they were going to try, and they didn't work out so well. But there's a lot of room for improvement all the way around. But there's one thing about firemen. The average person never criticizes firemen. It's not like being a policeman. Policemen, they catch it for everything. But the firemen, they always, the thing is, the danger I see anymore, and I've said this publicly, is your uniforms look too much like police. And the police are, in 80% of the communities, they're the enemy. And so when you go through the door, they don't know if you're a policeman or a firefighter, and you're liable to get shot. Because, and that's not a good deal. They had one just recently shot over in South Sioux. There wasn't much publicity about it, but they went to a nursing home, and the guy had a shotgun and shot one of the paramedics. It didn't do him much damage, but just the idea that it can happen.
Yeah.
And that's just one more thing to look out for.
It's always sounding off before you even on an EMS call. But yeah, we have, I see it. I mean, I'm sure you guys have ran into it inspecting. They're like, oh, okay, who's in trouble? Or I didn't do it.
I didn't do it.
Right.
That's
That's
right.
right.
I didn't do
No,
it. That's
yeah.
the first thing they say.
Sorry, not the police, or
Yeah.
the fire department.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, George, that many years in Sioux City, you did spend time out in California, but the majority of your time has kind of been here and chasing Sioux City fire rescue and stuff. What, I guess, and you're talking about, listen to you almost could give a fire behavior class just because, talking about the smoke conditions and the building noise and all this stuff. But what have you seen, I guess, over your years, the biggest kind of changes operationally or things that you have seen from the outside looking in, as far as how in Sioux City, how we fight fire and stuff?
Well, I have absolutely, I think you guys are right on the money. Given the amount of manpower you got, the equipment you've got to operate, I don't like to be critical of equipment, but I think sometimes that you need some different equipment. You need some quick response rigs. You need stuff that can get in and out of some of these neighborhoods the streets are not much wider in the driveway. The overhanging trees. I'd like to see a low profile aerial ladders here, where that you can manipulate your way through a neighborhood without tearing half the lights off the rig. But I think I would like to see a couple rescue trucks, devoted rescue trucks. At one time in the 50s, we had a civil defense fire department here too. And they did have some nice equipment. They had all the light plants. They had 2 rigs that had lights and rescue equipment on it. But they were king cab vehicles where you could put 4 people on it. And it was a quick response, which I thought was really good. Mm-hmm. Sioux City's got so much territory to cover, the mileage-wise, that it's impossible, to get anywhere quick, especially with the railroad tracks we got downtown and all the rest of it. But the only way that comes is with more fire stations, more people, and like I said, some more equipment. But and the EMS thing has been really good for the city. It's been started out as bleeding and breathing, but it's turned into kind of a jack of all trades anymore. And so that probably needs to be expanded. And I don't know. Again, it's all about money. Where do you get the money?
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And not that you're not doing a great job with what you got, but you could do a greater job if you had a little bit more. It's like anything.
Yeah. Ben, you got anything?
Yeah, I was gonna say. So we got fully involved here. I wanted to kind of pull this out and show everyone. You wrote a book. What year was this?
Don't ask me.
13, 14?
Yeah, something
somewhere
like
around
that.
there. So this just kind of shows all the documentation that you've made, since you've been chasing, specifically Sioux City, and this is even a fraction of what you've done in terms of just all over the country and the world, like you said, some of the work you've done.
Where can people get their own copy of Fully Involved,
Yes.
George?
Oh, Sioux City Gifts,
Sioux City Gifts.
1922 Fair Street.
Up on
yeah.
Pier Street there. Go see George at his shop. Go see George and his wife Luann, who's an absolute
Well,
sweetheart. I wish she was here today too.
Luann wrote it, so I just dictated it. And, the funniest thing in there is Red Skelton being the fire chief in Cathedral City, California. That was my idea. Red Skelton was one of the greatest guys to ever work with that you could imagine. And they didn't have a real fire chief out there, and I came to the conclusion one day that we should have a fire chief in Cathedral City. And knowing his way he felt about it, the community, I called him up and said, "Hey, Red, how would you like to be fire chief?" He said, "Oh, great." He says, "Does that mean I can ride in the fire truck?" And I said, "Yeah, you can have the fire truck if you want it." So anyway, he said, "Sure, I'll do it." And so I called, he said, "What am I supposed to do?" And I said, "Nothing, I'll call you back." So I called Bullard Company. They make the fire helmets out there. And I said, "I need a fire chief's helmet." The guy said, "Okay." And he says, "What do you want on it?" And I told him. And he said, I said, "How soon can I get it?" And he says, "Well," he says, 6 weeks at the soonest." And I said, "Oh." I said, "I needed it. I wanted to get it quicker than that." And he said, "What's the problem?" And I said, "Well, we're going to make Red Skelton fire chief." He said, "You are?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "You need more than a helmet." And I said, "Well, what do I need?" And he said, "Well, you need a badge, and you need this, and you need that." And I said, "Well, okay." I said, "Get all the stuff I need." And I said, he said, "It's going to be, what, 6 weeks?" He says, "Well, no." He says, "I can have it down there tomorrow afternoon for you." And I said, "Oh." And he said, "Can we get some pictures?" And I said, "Yeah, you can have all pictures you want." So the next day, they showed up with it, brought it from L.A., all bright and shiny, and I don't know how they did it. And I called Red up, and he says, "What do you want me?" He says, "I can bring one of the cars and come over to the fire station." And I said, "No, we're going to bring the fire truck over to your house." And he says, "Well, I just bought a brand new red Rolls Royce." He said, "I thought I could use that." And I
Chief's
said,
car.
"Well, you can if you want." But I said, we want to put you in the fire truck, and of course that's the picture that's in the book. But yeah, he was one of those super guys that would do anything, and he was very much into the community out there.
Yeah. So this book is the documented history of the Sioux City Fire Department.
Oh yeah.
Are all these photos yours?
Not some of them. Some of them, the horses were still running.
Yeah,
and-
the ones from
Okay,
1880.
Yeah,
obviously not.
you know,
In terms of
yeah.
George has been doing this for a while, but
Well, yeah.
the 50s,
took Chief
like
Kellogg's
1950
profile.
versus
Well,
1850,
yeah.
Ben, there's a
The-
little
the-
difference there.
The first funeral I went to as a kid was Kellogg's. He was buried out of Parazo Funeral Home, which was at 13th and Pierce, and that was the first funeral I remember. And they buried him in his uniform, and it was quite a ceremony. But I guess I was smitten then,
And
even
those-
more to.
Those listeners, when that Kellogg that he's George is referring to, for those people that aren't familiar with Sioux City or even live in Sioux City, there's a couple unique things that Sioux City has and Sioux City Fire Rescue has. One of them is George Kellogg, and if you come out to Station 4 anytime you want to come out, and we have the George M. Kellogg atrium there, so a lot of historical pieces. But George M. Kellogg was the longest-serving fire chief in history. And when I say that, I'm not saying Sioux City history,
Right.
but just in history, period, that he served as fire chief for 50 years. So George Kellogg saw, the end of like a lot of the hand-drawn hose carts. He saw the horses come and the horses go, and actually the motorized,
First motorized.
fire engines coming and stuff. But we have some stuff from his celebration, the chief celebration, some of the documentation, and then the stuff from that. It's really something, but that's unique to Sioux City. It's,
The reason he got the
Chief
job as a firefighter was he could run fastest with the drawn hose cart,
Yeah.
and he was the fastest guy, so they decided to make him chief. So that's how he got it. So.
It's promotional exams changed a little bit.
Yeah.
since then.
a little
A little
bit.
bit.
Yeah.
So as we go through the book and it documents all the history, any firefighters that stick out as some of your favorites to get to know?
Yeah, but again, my names I don't remember, but yeah, there's a few of them. There's a few of them that seem like they appear in Teely.
Talking Orville Teely, right?
Orwell, I've got him, I think, from the day he raised his hand and said, "I do," all the way through his career. And it just happened to be in front of me every time I took a picture. But there's one picture I always enjoy in that book. It was a PI out on the west side, and the guy had a car sitting on his foot, and he's laying face down. And Teely's running down the street with a little first aid kit, and that was our first emergency medical service that we had, a first aid kit and an inhalator. Incidentally, going back to that, at one time we only had one inhalator crew, they called it, or originally it was called pulmotor crew. The pulmotor crew was owned by Sioux City Gas Company, and they had a 1937 Lincoln Zephyr blue that they used to bring it out to the fires or to where a person had trouble breathing, and then the fire department would use it. But it was in their car, and eventually they gave the car and the inhalator to the city, or the pulmotors it was called. And then for years, Car 18 was the sole vehicle for medical response, and that was down at Station 1 at 6 and Water. And in 1973, there was a group of insurance men here in Sioux City that had an association, and I was at Channel 9. And we decided that was ridiculous, that they only had one inhalator in the whole town, and it would have to, because of the swimming pools and stuff, they were always running back and forth. So we approached Ed Higman, who was the chief, and said, "We want to buy some more inhalators." And Ed hit the ceiling. "Nope, not going to have the responsibility of that. We got one, that's enough." So quietly we went out, the insurance group and then KCAU, we bought 9 inhalators,
Jeez.
Stevens inhalators, and called a press conference and gave them to the city, to which the chief didn't talk to us for several weeks. But then they put one on each of 7 different rigs had an inlater on it. But if you go back into the early history of Sioux City, and I have the city codes, at one point, if you were to carry a stethoscope, a fireman could be fired. I don't know where they got this, because where would, number one, would they gotten a stethoscope, and why would they want to carry it? But if you had it on your person, you could be fired. You could also be fired for smoking in the fire station, but that was because that dated back to the horse.
The hay, yeah.
You set hay
Sure.
on fire.
Yeah.
But that not to say that not every rig that rolled out the door had a half pint of whiskey in the glove compartment. too.
Allegedly,
In
another
those
allegedly
days,
thing.
yes,
Yeah,
allegedly, yes.
Okay.
But and the city police used to refer to the fire department as the drunken painters.
I love it.
Yeah,
I love that.
yeah, and but you know, and I don't know. I wouldn't say I've ever witnessed, maybe out of the corner of my eye, anybody taking a drink on the job, but that's way back in history, the Grayson Fire. I always tell the story of when Grayson's burnt down. It was, oh God, it was cold that night, and I was, I think, 15 years old. I'm down there taking pictures, and Salvation Army was handing out coffee, and the then fire marshal, I was standing on the corner, and he pulled up in his car, and he looked at me, and I was walking down towards the Salvation Army. He said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going down there and get some coffee." He said, "You don't want any coffee?" I said, "Yeah, I'm freezing." He said, "Get in the car." So I got in the car, and he reached in the back, and he pulled up a thermos bottle and poured me a drink. It was mulled wine, warm wine with some type of seasoning in it. And I'm
Warmed you
15
right up too, didn't it?
15 years old, sitting there, and going, this is not too bad. But, you know, again, there was nothing wrong with it. That was life in those days.
Yeah,
And, you know,
yeah.
people like back now say, oh, no, not That was just, that was the way life was. You know, and nobody thought anything of it. And of course, people weren't out shooting each other every night either. You know, it was a different type of time. You can't judge what you do today by then, but no, it was good. And that was the night that they lost the tiller-driven aerial ladder because it froze to the building and bent.
Amazing
And,
picture of that.
Oh yeah, they getting it back. Barger Brothers was a wrecker service out on the west side, and they chose to move it out to their salvage yard, and to get that thing, because you couldn't get the ladder down, they got it bent back over the chassis, but they had to have a wrecker holding the ladder and drove it through town to get it back out there. But
Something to see.
it didn't survive that. And then what they replaced it with in the meantime, there was a period of time when they ordered a 75-foot aerial ladder on a straight bed. Ed Higman was chief, and he got an old straight truck and built up a rack on the back to put the ladders off the aerial on it, and they ran as a truck company out of ones for, it was almost a year until they got the new one. And then when they got the new one, they brought it in a train. It was in a train car, and the chains had broken. It had banged back and forth in it. So once it got here, they had to do a lot of body fender work on it to get it to where they could use it. But, you know, that was life.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that Grayson fire? Was that one of the first really big fires that you were able to shoot?
Probably, yeah. It ranked right up there. And another guy and I, who eventually went for the state of Iowa, he and I were driving around that night, and we drove down that street. We're just looking for stuff to take a picture of, and you could smell it. You could smell something, but you couldn't. There was no smoke, and it was about 9 o'clock. We were driving around, could smell it, and then we went home, and about 10:30, the alarm came in, and it started in Grayson's, and then it got John's Cafe next door, and it got to KC Hall, and it just went on down the street. But the ice was just incredible that night, and that was the first big run-in that the city firemen had with the Civil Defense Fire Department, because there were guys on the roof of the Grayson building, and they had stacked a ladder in the back, a 40-foot ladder, and we're on the roof with a 2.5-inch line, and for whatever reason, the civil defense guys took the ladder down.
Oh, yeah.
And the
Jeez.
fire chased them off the roof, and Ben Riley was one of them. They slid down a 2.5-inch line from
Wow.
the top floor. I was, 2.5 stories, to get out of the way. But there was bad blood after that.
Sure.
Yeah.
I imagine.
But, nobody takes a ladder down when you.
That's right.
Yeah.
I think
Well, especially if you didn't put it up.
That's right.
Taking it down.
one of the things that stuck out, George, when we talked a while back was we have our line of duty desk we've had, but how many close calls that we've had
Oh,
That people don't
Yeah.
even.
that
Yeah.
that we never get brought up.
Oh,
I
I know.
didn't know about just about any of the stories you told until we heard
no,
from
there were
you.
a lot of them, and a lot of them were again faulty building construction. Just same thing that happened to Ann House. That happened to a house up on the north side, where truck 3 they were trying to go in through the front door with a line, and front porch they had poured an inch of concrete over it, and fire from the basement had undercut it, and concrete went at a 45-degree angle right into the fire in the basement. And Tom Branzo, who was the captain and was on the line, he and another guy slid right into the fire. The other guy managed to get up the hose and partway crawled up in the hose and grabbed Branzo and drug him up. But that's back in the days when they were wearing those, I think they called them Hypalon turnout coats. They were silver.
The silver ones. Yeah.
And if you had any cracks in the silver portion of it, the threads would catch fire immediately. And there's pictures of him in the book. He got burned on the arms and face, and he went back to work afterwards. But that was the case of, again, the inadequate apparel for firefighters. I think the best thing that ever happened is when they went to this new turnout gear, and the 5.5-inch line to me was a godsend, and positive pressure. Those are the 3 things in my career that I've looked at that have made the biggest influence on firefighting, and the training. I listen to you guys in the morning going out for training, and I think, oh God, they're overtraining, because you can't overtrain. But what the thing is it's the basics that keep you alive.
That's
It's
right.
not the advanced stuff.
Yep.
And I've had occasion to watch guys, it wasn't that long ago, but they tried to tie a booster line in to pull up on one of the apartments downtown, and I watched them, and they get it halfway up, and knot had come loose and it'd fall down. I thought I should go over and show them how to tie it. And because you had to know, I think it was 20 knots. I mean, there were 20 different knots you had to absolutely know, even way back when. And so I was walking across the street, and the AC was sitting over there by that Dairy Queen that's over there. I was laughing. He says, "What's the matter?" And I said, "Never mind. You don't need to know." I just got in the car and laughed.
Out
But
of sight, out of mind.
it's the basics that keep you alive.
Yeah.
And that's you can't emphasize that enough.
Yeah. What do you remember from probably some of the darker moments with the fire department? We have the TV, everyone goes home and is happy and stuff like that. But
Well, of course, the fire wreck on Nebraska Street, that was a bad one and should never happen. I seriously, when I look back, hen house should never happen, but it did. And you should never lose a fireman.
Mhm.
You shouldn't. I mean, if you not in a city of this size. I can see it in a major city. L.A. They had a fabric manufacturing plant out there, and upstairs they had stored bales of cotton, and that cotton got wet, and everybody forget, the retention of the weight, and then it collapsed on top of it. That stuff you can't prevent. That's going to happen. If you're going to go in, you're going to take the chance. But a town of this size, we shouldn't be ever losing anybody for anything like that.
Well, fortunately, it was unfortunate that, in Captain Johnson, we had on last episode, Dusty, it was Dusty's dad, and talked about it a little bit and stuff. But, fortunately, we haven't had any we've had close calls and near misses, I think, but we haven't had any lost any other line
No,
of duties since
the-
Penthouse. So
What was the name, the guy that the chimney fell on? That shouldn't have happened either.
Kudron?
Yeah.
Edward Kudron.
He was, as I understand it, he had a hearing problem, and apparently the other guys yelled at him, but you know, it was unfortunate, but those things are going to happen. I don't care if you go out on the fire ground, something can happen. You just don't want it to happen. You know, always have a path out. I tell everybody that. I don't care what you're doing. If you're driving down the street, have a hole that you're going to get in if you have to, you know, know where you're going to go. One of the things I did as a kid, and I don't know if it's in that book or not, I worked on one of the first ambulances Sioux City had, Sioux Ambulance. And by the time I was 15, I delivered 5 babies. And only because nobody else wanted to do it.
Yeah,
And I was
sure.
on the ambulance, and I was going to Heelan, and they'd pick me up early in the morning if there was a call, and then I'd still be able to get to Heelan. And I can remember a set of twins. The guy that was driving the ambulance, he knew nothing about it, and I knew even less, but there was a pamphlet, a first aid kit that said something about it, so I read it on the way, and it was on Wall Street, now Floyd Boulevard, and I delivered one of the babies in the house, and 4 other kids are sitting on the floor watching me, and wrapped the kid up, and I'm looking at the clock, and I'm saying, we got to go like hell. I got to be at school at 8 o'clock. So we wrapped the gal up and the baby up, and away we go. And we're going up Jackson Street. We got right to between the 1300 block, because we hit a dip right in front of the old tavern up there. And she says, I think I'm having another one. I said, no, you're not. Close your legs. And she says, no, I think I'm having another one. I pulled a blanket back and said, yep, we're having another one. So got the other one, went up to Old Lutheran Hospital, which was the 27th and Pierce, and usually you pulled in the back. That's where their outpatient was. And I told the guy who was driving, I said, go to the front door, go to the front door. He says, no, there's no. I said, go to the front door. So he went to the front door, and these nurses come running out. And said, what's going on? I said, got babies here for you. And they, of course, they wanted to ooh and ah over the babies. I said, I got to get to school, take the baby, go.
Come on.
Take her, go. Well, a couple of years later, that was about 3 years later, I went to a deal down on the end of Floyd now, or Wall Street, where they were building the interstate, and one of the kids was killed down there, one of the babies. He was down there with his siblings, and there was a cave in the sand, and he didn't make it.
Wow.
So yeah, those things you remember.
Yeah, sure.
But
what about any other, like some of your most memorable incidences or calls, or ones that really just stick out in your head that over the years?
You know, I mean, I don't know. There's, so many. I mean, a lot of it has nothing to do with the fire department. I had a lot of, in a career like mine, you get to do a lot, you get to see a lot, and sometimes you don't reflect on them until long afterwards. Like, hell, I traveled with Frank SInatra for years, and he was a great guy to work with, and you couldn't ask for a better guy.
Wow.
Bob Hope, I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy.
Go back to Sinatra. Liz was telling me a story about that you know about Sinatra that you witnessed one night with Frank, and some guy said something to a lady that Frank was with or something.
Oh yeah, well that was her name. But anyway, we were in Las Vegas. That was I think she's talking about the night he tipped over all baked Alaska desserts. But yeah, he could be short fused, and his dad was a fireman. His dad was a captain on Hoboken Fire Department, and I said to him, to his dad one day, I said, somebody said you're on the fire department. He said, yeah, I was on the Hoboken Fire Department. I said, what was your job? He said, well, I was captain. And I said, how'd you get to be captain? Just making small talk. And he pointed to Dolly, his wife, and Frank's mother. And she was a politician. She got the job. Okay, whatever, But, I would watch him. Well, he was going with Jill St. John. She probably remembers that. We were traveling someplace, and we were at one of the country clubs. And when you travel with Sinatra, it was like traveling with the president. You know, he had his security guys and drivers and cars and all that crap, but he always liked to drive himself. And him and Jill St. John were having a fight in the country club, and there was a big party of us. And I don't know, it was 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. He decided to go home, and she had got up and left. And so he goes out, and the vehicles are all lined up. And I used to travel with a PR guy, and they brought he had a Buick Riviera convertible, and they pulled it up. And he says, "I won't get in it." "Well, why won't you get in it?" "She had her dirty butt in it." "Oh, okay." So now it's coming up on 2 o'clock in the morning, and he says, "Get me another car." And they said, "Well, what other car do you want?" He said, "Get me a new car." And sits down. Well, all his henchmen, you know, had their own little, in those days, Rolodexes, and they were calling car dealers in the middle of the night. And car dealers are coming out with cars for him to look at, you know. And he's just sitting there, and finally a Ford dealer pulls up in a Ford van, and we thought, why would anybody bring that up? He gets up, walks around it, gets in it, and drives away. And these crew of his is just handing out money like it was, I don't know, it was like it was being printed, and he's handing these guys money for bringing cars out. And so he gets in, drives away, and of course everybody else to get in their car and go with him, you know, like the president, you know, take him out of his house. But he would do stuff like that, and then other times he'd be the nicest, coolest. He'd come to our house, and come in and walk in the kitchen, get the coffee pot, and sit down and have a cup of coffee. That's why I got a divorce. That's why the first divorce, because my wife was a nurse, and those kind of people scared her to death. And she'd go lock herself in the bedroom when they'd come in. She just didn't want to be around. She didn't know how to act.
Sure.
And so I finally came to the parting of the way, and I was going to go to the East Coast and work, and stopped in Sioux City and got involved with a go-go dancer at Harbor Inn.
We'll have that.
Here I am.
That'll happen.
Yeah,
That'll happen.
yeah, it does.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, but that was a different life. Bob Hope was the worst human being you could think of to work with. Nice guy, don't work for him, don't do stuff for him. And I shot most of the stuff for Chrysler of him, because Chrysler was his big sponsor. And we'd shut down, I can remember one day shutting down a golf course for 3 hours so we could take pictures of him. And we paid for it. I mean, we paid for everything.
Wow.
And we got 2 rounds of golf in with him with a golf pro. And he blew up at us. And there was like 16 or 18 people in that team from Chrysler, from the public relations firm, all of it. And he just started screaming at all of us and throwing stuff and everything. So we went home, and they kept saying to me, "You got the picture? You got the picture?" I said, "Oh, hope the hell I do." But then one time we were at his house, and again, we'd bring a stand-in, a makeup guy, all these people, get everything set up. I was doing a headshot of him, and it was in the morning. That's when he wanted it. Right, he's sitting by his pool doing all this. Got all ready for him. So somebody says, "You go get him." So they went in the house. He comes out, sits down, says, "What do you want me to do?" And I said, "I want you to do this and this." And I was using a large format camera, and I shot one piece of film and pulled the holder, turned it around, shot the second piece, took the holder out, handed it to the assistant for me, turned around, and he was gone. He's walking off, and I thought, what's he doing? He walks out the gate, gets in his car, and drives away. And we're all standing there looking at each other like, what the hell is that all about, you know? And so Dolores, his wife, was standing there, and she's standing there with a tray with sandwiches and iced tea and all this. And I turned around and looked at her, and I said, "You know, when you die, you're going to be a saint." And she says, "Why?" And I said, "Putting up at that." And she said, and she laughed, and she said, "Oh, he's not that bad." I said, "Yes, he is."
Yes, he is.
But yeah. So some of that's not in that book. The other book I got, Clicks, is called.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'll have to get that
But
one and stuff, too.
no, I mean, you run into some people that are super guys and nice guys, and
You said you did on our pre-show meeting stuff. You said you took some pictures of the Kennedys and stuff. So with yeah. So did you ever meet JF? Did you remember
Oh, yeah.
John F. Kennedy? Yeah.
many times.
Yeah.
Wow.
Many times. Yeah, I still have the Secret Service stuff that they gave me when I was with him. But yeah, I went to a lot of parties and stuff that never, there was never any publicity about it. And that was kind of interesting because when I do them, they would take my camera case and take all the film away from me. And then they would give me the film to shoot it with. And so then I'd go ahead and shoot whatever their guy would tap me on the shoulder and take a picture with all that. And you knew people that didn't mind having a drink in their hand, but if they had a drink in their hand, you'd have to give them one of these, and they'd put the drink behind them, and it was all like protocols.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And then they would, after it was all done, I would give the film to a White House rep, and he'd count the rolls, and then whatever was left, they'd give me. But I could never take anything with me.
Sure.
And I had that happen with Prince Philip. I shot him playing polo. And it was the same routine, but it wasn't the U.S. Secret Service, it was their people. And that was fine. And what they said to me, they were very proper, We wouldn't want to embarrass the prince if he did something wrong on the polo pony. I said, I wouldn't know if it was right or wrong if the polo pony ran over it. So I said, that's fine with me. Because they didn't want to be be offended by them taking the film. I didn't care if they did the film, but they paid me. That's all I cared.
There you go.
But yeah, it was a great learning experience.
Well, you heard it here first.
Yeah.
George shot JFK. So.
Yeah, sure did. Many times.
Many times. Many times.
One picture I got of him has been around a lot. I never got any fanfare or publicity out of it. He was going into a church, and I was allowed to be the only person in the church when he walked in the front door. And the news media is all outside, again, hating George, because why is he there and we're here? But as he came in, he tripped, and he started to fall forward, and this priest grabbed him, and God, that picture is everywhere. But I only wish that I got residuals off it. That would have been nice. But yeah, I've had some pretty good moments.
Yeah, no kidding. It sounds like it.
Anyone else that stands out?
Well, I don't know. There were so many of them that you got caught up in that thing, and you just didn't pay any attention to it anymore. A lot of people, Derek Highland, nobody ever heard of the man, but he was one of the big steel industry owners in the country. And I was talking to him one day, and he was talking, there were three of us standing there, and they were talking about cars. And he was talking about how his Rolls, he hated it because it was a terrible vehicle. It felt like you were riding a truck. And the other guy was agreeing with him. And they looked at me, and I said, I've never ridden in one. So I don't know anything about it. He says, what do you mean you've never ridden a Rolls? I said, I have no occasion to ever be in one. Well, you can take mine. I said, I don't want to take yours. Next day, at my house, guy comes to the door, bangs on the door, and he says, Mr. Highland wanted me to bring the car. Here's the keys. And there was the Rolls. And I said, my God, not in this neighborhood. Don't leave that thing out there. I said, drive it in the driveway, Well, he says, all right, it's insured. He says, it's full of gas. He says, whenever you're tired of it, just let me know. I'll come get it.
Wow.
I never did drive it.
No.
I just, every day I go out and look at it and go, well, the neighbors are going to talk about this. Where did you get that? But, yeah, it's things like that you remember. But, those people, I didn't realize who Derek Highland was until I got back to Sioux City and started looking him up.
Wow.
Phil Regan was another guy. He was at one of the parties one night that I was at his house. It was a Kennedy deal. And when that party got done, it was again in the middle of the night, and one of the Secret Service guys said to me, "You don't drink, do you?" And I said, "No." He said, "Well, Mr. Regan wants to go to his ranch up in Apple Valley." He said, "Will you take him up there?" And I said, "I got a '65 Ford Mustang out there." I said, "I'm sure he don't want to ride in that." And he says, "No, take one of his cars." And he said, "Just leave your car here, it'll be okay." So, okay, so they poured him in the back seat, and we go up Interstate 10 out there. And I'm driving the speed limit, and he raises up out of the back seat. He says, "What the hell? Why are you going so slow?" And I said, "Well, doing the speed limit." He says, "See those switches underneath the dash?" I'm looking around. "Yeah." He says, "Turn them on." So I flip them on. Red lights, front and back, come on, blinking. And a highway patrol car. He was at that time. The California Highway Patrol couldn't run radar. They had to chase you if they wanted you. Well, I was doing the speed limit, but because of the hour of the night, he came up out of the ditch and he was following me. And so when I turned on those red lights, I thought, "Oh, I'm in trouble now." And he just pulled over and parked by the side of the road again. So we went to Apple Valley with red lights. So I got up, dumped him out, and took the car back without the red lights on. And I had never figured out what the deal was, but his license number was PR1. And I noticed that when I brought the car back. And obviously, he had a lot of clout with everybody in the country other than me, because I didn't know who he was. Well, I found out he was a retired New York City policeman. He was an opera singer in Metropolitan Opera, and a big, big contributor to the Democratic Party. So that's,
Okay.
you always run into stuff like that you didn't know why things were happening. Bob Hope Desert Classic, I did all the photography for him. And the guy that was running that PR wanted Colorado license plates on all the cars that the pros were using, but because they had mountains on them, well, they wanted them to be, they're green, and they wanted blue mountains, but they wanted the cars to say Bob would be one set of license plate, Hope would be one set, Desert would be one set, and that. So they called the governor of California, and he called the governor of Colorado. And of course, we had the license plates immediately. So we're down on Highway 111 out there in front of one of the country clubs, trying to take a picture of cars saying Bob Hope Desert. The highway patrol guy pulls up. Says, "What's the matter? Don't you like our license plates?" We said, "Yeah, they're fine, but they want these." He says, "Well, they're on a state highway, and I'm going to have to write you a ticket." Well, we didn't have cell phones in those days. So I'm going, "Whatever." And he says, "I don't know how the hell you people think you can get by with stuff like this." Okay. So one of the guys got walkie-talkie, and he makes a phone call or radio call. Pretty soon the beeper goes off on the patrol car. Patrolman goes over his car, comes back, folds up his ticket book. He said, "That was the governor. You can do whatever the hell you want." Got in the car and drove away.
Jeez.
Yeah, you talked about being donors to political parties and stuff. You probably got a good inside look to just the dirty laundry behind Hollywood and
yeah.
Who's always scratching
It's
each other's
like
backs.
it's like everything else. I mean, they were able to years ago. They were able to keep that publicity down. It's just like taking the film away from me.
Mm-hmm.
But today they don't. And there's so many people looking to make a name for themselves. So any little piece of dirt they get, they take it out and they hang it out on the clothesline.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to enhance their own position in life. And as a result, I look at the news media and I can't believe what I see. But everybody wants to be a personality, they talk about Cronkite and those guys, Tom Brokaw. Tom Brokaw worked at KTIV when I worked there. And the thing was is that those people were doing news. They were really honest-to-God news. And like Dave Nixon just died. Well, Dave was somewhat of a celebrity, but he did believe in what he did and had some morals and principles and stuck to them. But the guys today want to make that quick buck, and they'll do and say anything. They'll make up stories. They'll tell half truths. The politicians do it. Everybody does it. But I ran for city council here once, and boy, I'll tell you, don't ever do that. Don't ever do that. If you ever get an idea that you want to do it, take 2 aspirin and lay down until it goes away. But because number one, people expect you to do whatever they want you to do, and they don't understand your one vote. And you can't do that. I mean, you can't one vote. You got to look at the whole scheme of things and say what's going to be good for everybody, or most of the people. But you can't do that.
Yeah,
and,
people probably start expecting favors from you.
Oh, they call you. If you put a sign in your yard right now that said you're going to run, you start getting phone calls tonight.
Sure.
And you say, well, I haven't even got elected. Don't make any difference. They want to get on the bandwagon. And well, I wouldn't recommend anything. Be a firefighter. It's easier.
There you go.
You put the fire out and go home.
That's
And,
right.
Never be rich, always be happy.
Just don't break out too many windows.
What I guess and something too that most people don't know about you is, and as long as we're on the Los Angeles and talking about California stuff and some of that outside of Sioux City film, is your prop studio, the stuff and
we
the
have
different
a prop
things.
company out there. We're partners, and we have been for quite a few years. That started over the 232 thing. When the 232 crash happened here and they did the movie 1,000 Heroes, we kind of got injected into that because I'd had some experience out there, and between Luann and I, Luann did the extras casting for that show, and we got some of the props, and she coordinated all the out-of-town ambulances and stuff and all that. And so one of the guys that was working the show was a set decorator for it, and we got to know him. And then we were doing the Gateway ads, and we went to California to do some of them. We hired him and his people, and we were going to prop companies out there, and Mark Meyer, I said to him, God, I said, this is really an interesting business, and it is, if you ever go through prop shops out there. And because there's all types of specialty ones. There's science fiction, there's other ones that do military stuff, there's all kinds of stuff. I said, this would be a fun business to be in. And he says, well, I want to get out of doing movies, on a per movie basis. He said, might be an idea. Well, he started it, and we joined into it and helped him out with some money and stuff. And next thing you know, we're in the prop business. And we have a 80,000 square foot building in North Hollywood and 18 people.
Wow.
And we supply a lot of props. What's the one that the remake military picture?
Oh, the Maverick.
Maverick.
Yep.
We did some stuff with that one by phone. I introduced him to a company called Granger's, which used to be here and everywhere in the world. Sometimes you think these people that are in that industry really know everything that there's out there, and they were having some problem with the lighting in the hangar. And I said, have you tried Granger's? And they said, what's Granger's? And I said, well, they're a supply company, an industrial supply outfit. And they called me back and said, God, you really saved our bacon on that one. We never heard of them before. And I thought everybody knew about Granger's. Well, they don't, But, we, like I said this morning, Luann got a call at 6 o'clock this morning for some movie that she's doing stuff for right now as we speak. But it's a different business. You can make a lot of money. COVID almost broke us, but they're back and they're bigger and better than ever. So I think the survival is on the horizon for that company. But it's. And now we're building a Holocaust museum out at the railroad
Right.
thing, and that's consuming about 29 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Yeah, I've seen some of the concepts and some of the
Yeah.
ideas and everything. It's going to be. It looks like it's going to be just
It's
an
gonna be really
amazing.
neat. It's going to be
amazing
kind of like
exhibit.
Holocaust Disneyland, but we're doing a lot of electronic stuff. Dave Gross is a guy that I worked with for years at Channel 9, and he's semi-retired, and so he's doing electronics, but it'll be different, and we'll have it open probably in 2 months.
Because one of the you have one of the rail cars that's out there is an
Right.
actual.
Yeah, we
one
got
of
it.
the actual
It's
train
not an
cars,
actual
right?
car.
Not the
It's a
actual
car
one.
that
Okay.
was a reproduction car that was used in the Lone Ranger, and so we got it. We trucked it here from California, and are redoing it and putting the guardhouse on it and doing it up, and it'll be pretty slick.
Mm.
Yeah, when you walk in that car, you think you're going down the road.
Wow.
The things will be going by in the windows and all the rest of it. So yeah, it's going to be neat. Like I said, it's just there's only so many people that you can tap that know how to work on that stuff, and but we're getting it together.
George, you were talking earlier about how COVID really changed the movie industry and everything. Do you have an opinion on how everything's kind of going from streaming nowadays, and everything's a miniseries versus how movies are made and the quality of movies
Well,
coming out?
some of the stuff that you see on some of these off channels is better than what you're seeing in Hollywood, I think. But generally speaking, the new documentaries that are being done, a lot of them are really good. And a lot of the docudramas are good. There's a lot of junk out there. But it's really helped the industry as far as keeping people working in Hollywood. A lot of them are on real short budgets, but nevertheless, they're doing good product. And if they keep it up, I think it's good. People still have an appetite for junk,
Sure.
and
Always will.
yeah, and they always will. And it's just like junk food. They'll all like junk food, but that's always going to be floating around out there. But I think generally speaking, things are being done pretty well. And some of the people that have been mainstream directors and stuff, a kid that I worked with at Channel 9, John Baring, he does Blue Bloods.
Mm-hmm.
He's the director of Blue Bloods, Law and Order. FBI International he's doing. I talk to him about twice a week. But he's doing some good stuff, and his daughter now is a director. She lives in Atlanta. Atlanta's getting to be quite a filmmaking place, and she's down there working, doing stuff. But and Ron Clements, who of course was the savior of Disneyland, he worked at Channel 9, and he'll be here in April because they're going to do. I think they're doing which one of these movies? Aladdin. They're going to play the thing, and the symphony orchestra is going to be the music for it. And he's going to be here for that.
I'd have been no.
Well, I can tell you a story somebody just did for one of the farm magazines about the manure pile burning out the stockyards. I had a call from a guy in Mississippi that writes for one of the farm magazines. Are you on?
Yeah, I'm recording.
Okay.
So.
We'll put that right in the middle of it.
Yeah.
There you go.
We'll throw it.
So anyway,
Newer file.
called me up and he wanted some stories about the Judas goats that they had in the stockyards down there. Judas goat would lead the lambs to slaughter and then turn around and go back, and they'd give the Judas goat a cigarette, unlit cigarette, and that was his reward, and he'd take another look. Well, he wanted to do a story about that, and because he thought that was just hilarious. And I said, well, it went on for years down there, and so we had to go through that dialogue. I said, but you ought to do a story about the manure piles down there that used to catch fire from spontaneous ignition. He said, what do you know about them? And I said, I know a lot. I got a bunch of pictures of them down there waiting in the manure trying to put the fire out, the fire department. And so we went through the whole dialogue, and he was rolling on the ground laughing down there in Mississippi. But I said, the Chamber of Commerce decided that because of the odor that's what's driving business out of Sioux City, so they put up a 15-foot metal fence around it. And I said that was supposed to keep the odor in, which is true. And but it was common in the summer that they would catch fire. And I mean, there's a picture, I think it's in the fire book, but there's just acres of manure that they'd clean the pens out and pile it up. They had no place to go with it. They'd give it to farmers for fertilizer. But then the EPA came down on them because when it would rain, it would run into the Floyd River and into the Missouri River. But it was great stories, and the guys that had to go down there and put the fire out, they'd be dragging that 2-inch line through that manure. And, how would you like to have to clean up after that, But then we were talking about various incidents over the years, like, they used to have, the assistant chief used to always have what they call the chauffeur. Mm-hmm. And I'm 100% to bring back the chauffeurs again today because the ACs have so much paperwork to do and computer work to do that they need somebody to drive while somebody is distracted with the computer. But that all happened because of a fellow by the name of Charlie Cool, who was an assistant fire chief. And Charlie had a very, very heavy foot, and he would wreck a car virtually every week. He would, and I mean, when he would wreck them, they were wrecked. And he had one deal: the door comes open, the red light comes on, the siren goes, and get out of my way. And if they didn't, he'd push them out of the way. But they finally found out it was cheaper to put a guy there to drive him, so that's how it started, and of course it ended because shortage of manpower. Mm-hmm. But and then Bob Arnold, who was a chief at one time, Bob, when he started, he was the tiller man on that aerial ladder that had the tractor pull it, and they were at an alarm on 3rd Street, and somebody pulled in another alarm on them, and the driver took off, but Bob had not got up on the tiller seat yet.
Oh, man.
And they went around the corner at 3rd going up Douglas, and the back end swung around and went right through the window at there was a Lincoln Seed and Feed. So busted the window out and took the corner off the building. But so the aerial ladder had a ding in it before it ever got to the Grayson fire. But we used to have
we also no longer have tiller ladders in Sioux City.
No, I know, no. But I'll tell you, if you want to see something exciting, go to San Francisco and watch those guys. Yeah. They can do things with that tiller that you can't imagine.
I've seen videos online.
They can win an alley with one just like grease lightning.
Well, like stuff you can, like they're putting these things in like a place you can hardly drive your car.
I know it.
And they're taking corners with these tillers. It's just
unbelievable.
It's just amazing.
Apartment complexes with tight turns around.
And they're just as casual about it. My God, I'd be
bleeding. You see the tiller drift when they when they're running the blocking. that oh man, it's just cool stuff.
Yeah,
Shipper's gonna get all worked up.
You're speaking my language, guys.
That's right.
Yeah.
Hey, side note, George, the goats, the Judas goats, like just a quick Google search, like literally pulled up an article where George is mentioned in it specifically. Yeah. This guy wrote in November of 2022, and there's pictures of this goat, and he said, right in his article that the goat, and then the goat would get to the cigarette, and he's addicted to the nicotine. That's what he wants in the cigarette.
There you go.
Yeah, and this goat would lead. They're trained goats, and they would lead these sheep up the platform up to the kill floor.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
George, before I want to talk about Flight 232, any other fires that stand out? Well, I mentioned Carroll Apartments was one.
Oh, Carroll Apartments was a dandy. Katie Feed, of course, that was a dandy. Because the picture, I think I have a picture of one of the, it's Ed Higman, the chief, and Skidmore was standing there with him. He was the training officer. And the city engineer standing behind him with this horrified look. That's because while KD was burning, there used to be a company down there that rehabbed railroad cars, and then we caught fire at the same time, and they were like a half a mile apart down there, right line under the viaduct, and they're going like, we've got everything committed down here. What are we going to do about that up there? You know, and but Katie has had several fires that have been pretty much dandies, and I think they finally figured it out how to not have fires, which helps. But 232, of course, we did that show. That's an interesting show. We did a show called Alert 3. And what happened on that one was we were approached by the Sioux City Fire Department after that event to put together a film showing the fire department's role in it. Well, I can't think of the guy's name, was string officer. He came in with all, because I did not go out there. I worked for General Electric during that deal. We were doing a lot of the technical stuff at our studio. We were doing a lot of duplication and engineering type stuff for General Electric. So I didn't go out there. So I said, you get all the stuff together and we'll put a show together. And then what they wanted it to be is the Sioux City Fire Department had the leadership role. Well, that didn't come to pass. So Earl Schmitty, that he was the training officer. So he got all the stuff together and we started going through it. And I said, the one that keeps coming to the top in this is Gary Brown. And I said, he seemed to had the plan, and they worked that plan. So they said, well, okay, we'll go back. So I went back and said, well, go ahead and do the show. So we did the show. And honest to God, I got sued over the thing by Mercy Medical because they said I was making money off the crash, which it was not. We had about $10,000 cash in that show. And they told us to, first of all, United Airlines was going to pay for it, and they wouldn't pay for it. So they said, well, go ahead and sell it and make some money off of it if you can. So we sold it for $49, and we gave away as many as we sold, including to LA. But anyway, they picked that movie up and made the movie 1,000 Heroes. That was based on that movie.
Correct.
And so that's how we got involved in it. And I'm telling you, it was Sioux City's greatest moment. Everybody did everything right. I mean, there was no outstanding person. The whole town was a hero because nobody got in anybody else's way. Each organization did what they had to do. And if there was ever a town that pulled together, and the national publicity that Sioux City got out of that thing was incredible. Probably the only tragedy in that film that we didn't see is they had a premiere here, and Charlton Heston's meal got dropped at the Hilton Hotel by accident, to which you could feel the air go out of the room when it happened, that their celebrity's meal had hit the deck. And but he responded very well. But there's still bad blood over that thing, and there should not have been, because I think everybody did a masterful job. And you talk about the news media and the way they handled it. There were news media that had went down and bought sheriff's uniforms and tried to get into the hangar down there where the bodies were. There were people dressed up as Red Cross workers that were from the National Enquirer trying to get in down there. There were a lot of things that went on behind the scenes that were never brought out. Mm-hmm. But Sioux City handled it. I don't think any other town could have handled it as well as they did.
No, we'll put some links in the show description and stuff, that because the videos, I think a lot of people see, like when disasters happen and this, and I didn't even realize it before I moved down here. I'd watch videos of the crash on just disaster shows or whatever, mm-hmm. and not realize it. Then all of a sudden one day I'm like, oh, they said Sioux City. I'm like, wait a minute, that's where I'm in Sioux City. It's like, oh, that happened. That's the crash. So we'll put some links in the show description and stuff, show notes. But the term Alert 3, though, that you called the movie, and that's
I was
an
just
actual.
gonna ask
Yeah,
that,
and
or
that's
talk
what-
about that.
Yeah, and that's because that's an actual.
That's an actual,
term.
FAA term. An alert 2 is just that. Your equipment is standing by. Alert 3 is imminent crash.
Yeah, imminent crash or plane already
And
crashed on the ground.
the thing was is that there was, because of the way it was circling, they at one point had the equipment at the other end of the runway. And then everything was getting screwed up. And finally they said, somebody said, no, they're coming into the other end. So they moved up, but then they were right in the path of where they were going to land, so they had to back it up. But there was a lot of sparring around for getting in position, but everybody was in position. And the Orville was AC that day. And what's his name? Red Dog. The other.
For you here.
Hathaway.
Yeah.
Yes,
Hathaway.
Jim Hathaway, right?
Yep.
Jim, that crash affected in a very dramatic way. I don't think Jim ever recovered from it, but everybody thought they could do more, and there wasn't anything you could do. I mean, you know, Al Haynes, all of them. I mean, they did everything they could, and they did it as well as they could.
Well, for a crash that, you know, if you look into 232 and stuff, him landing or getting, you know, is landing as much as he could,
Absolutely.
because the biggest thing is that, yes, there was a loss of life, but it's how many survivors there were.
Right.
But that's his feats that he did with that plane have never been duplicated in
They
a
couldn't.
simulator.
They've
They
tried.
cannot duplicate it like he did that day.
I asked him, I said, what would have happened if he'd have came down on the wheels? He says, well, as fast as they were coming down, he says the wheels would have probably sheared off. But he says if it had rolled out, he said we would probably wound up in the river. And he said he thinks that he killed a lot more.
This is Al Haynes.
Al
right?
Haynes, yeah.
You got to talk to him, I assume.
Oh yeah, yeah. In fact, I was invited to go on his last flight when he formally retired. We all went out to Denver, and that was kind of interesting too. Gary Brown, Dave Kaplan, who helped get him out of the cockpit. Who else was on that? Hathaway. And we all went out to Denver and flew with him back to SeaTac, Seattle. That's where he originally came out of. They told us, we were sitting back in the steerage, I call it, in the middle. And they had the same crew, the same surviving crew was flying the airplane. And they had a standby crew just in case anybody freaked out. And I was sitting next to a gal that worked for the Iowa Attorney General's office. She had nothing to do with the crash at all. So they said when we land at SeaTac, the fire trucks will be lying on the runway and they're going to spray the plane with water as a salute. So we're all sitting there, and I've got the further seat back, and Gary Brown's sitting right in front of me, and Hathaway's there, and over here is Kaplan. They all got their uniforms on. I'm sitting there. We're flying in, and all of a sudden, I hear the stewardess say, "Oh my God, you get those guys from Sioux City." And I'm thinking, what? And this gal next to me is freaking out because all she heard when we took off is about the crash. So she thought we were crashing. And I said, no, we're not crashing. And I had to explain the whole thing to her. And she says, oh my God, and she's shaking, and I said, we're not crashing, everything's fine. And then I hear this stewardess say, oh my God, get those guys from Sioux City. And I was going, I don't like that sound. So she comes up and bangs me on the shoulder, and she says, get your buddies, we got a problem. And this gal now is right on the road. So I hit Gary Brown on the shoulder, and I said, hey, and he's got a drink in his hand. I said, come on. I said, get the other two guys, something's going wrong. And he said, what are you talking about? I said, just get them, come on, we gotta go in the back of the plane. So we all get up and go back in the plane. Well, there's a guy had a seizure, and he's down under the seats.
No.
And he is not doing good at all. So we're standing there going, what the hell do you want us to, so they're trying to get him out from under the seat. In the meantime, we're getting right up towards SeaTac, and the gal comes on the PA system. She says, we've had an emergency aboard the aircraft. She says, everybody remain in your seat when we come to a halt. She said, it's being handled. So the plane now is just, so they get him out, and Gary Brown has got him under the arms. Kaplan's got him under the knees. I've got the guy's luggage, and Hathaway is in the mix. So when they pull up, they drop the gate or the off-ramp in the back of the aircraft. And those two go out first. Well, there's an ambulance and sheriff's cars and all this, and these sheriff's deputies pull out their nightsticks and they come running up the steps to greet this thing. And Gary says, put the nightsticks away and get a IV going on this guy or we're going to lose him. And so they thought, because Gary Brown was in his uniform, they thought he was a sheriff's deputy fighting this guy. Mm-hmm. And the guy's out like a light. So anyway, we get him bundled up, get him in the ambulance and gone. And so in the meantime, they got everybody off the airplane. But as I was going out the door with the luggage, she says, we got to thank the guys from Sioux City. They rescued us again. But they said that over the PA system. And God, I'll never forget it. I mean, I thought, oh, this is all we needed, you know, bad PR for everybody concerned. But, okay, what's next?
We, we're before the tones drop. Well, we have our paging system, and it's everything pretty much 2-tap. That isn't a fire. Otherwise, it's 4 taps for fires. Yeah. Mm-hmm. The paging system, I'm reading through the book, was pretty innovative that they started here in Sioux City. Yeah. And the reason we call them taps is because everything was sent out by Morse code, right? Right. And it's cool that we still call it a 4-tap because everything's been electronic for years now.
Well, yeah, but originally what would happen when an alarm came in, especially if they pulled a box, it would come in on a ticker tape, and it would tap it out. Then the phone would ring. There was no dial on the phone. You just pick the phone up and they give you the address. And then you look at the board. In fact, the board was down at 3s. I don't know if it's still
hanging up
with the numbers for where that location is.
The box numbers.
And then when I was a kid and used to hang around up at 4s at 1414 Nebraska, they would write it in chalk on a blackboard when they went out the door. And that's so if they called in a second shift there, they'd know where it was at.
Where it was at.
Yeah. But, and then the original walkie-talkies they got were humongously heavy. And then they got a single channel walkie-talkie that they used. But, yeah, the taps, people wonder all the time. The other thing is that the old linen hose had to be washed every time you brought it back. Mm-hmm. And the hose bed had to be cleaned out and everything. And then Thursdays is clean out day, and that's because of the feed coming in for the horses. Yeah. If you look back in the early city codes, if you were arrested and charged with a crime and we're going to serve 30 days or more in the county jail, you could serve it at the fire station.
Wow.
And you were paid $1 or $2, but you would be at the fire station and you'd clean up after the horses and do whatever they wanted you to do. But that was
Proby work.
Yeah, that's what it was. Proby work.
Proby work. Probation.
Yeah.
You're on probation.
Yeah, probation. Probate work. Yeah, it's
same thing.
Is that why they call it probation?
That's I can remember you tell people like, I'm on probation.
Yeah.
Sioux City Fire Department.
Yeah, they're like, oh, what'd you do?
Look, like,
yeah,
No,
why aren't you got an orange suit on?
Speaking of probation, part of our process when your first years, you learn the city and you learn the maps, the streets, and it's always growing, so it's getting more and more. But we have iPads and phones and everything now. And so 2 questions. One, what was response time? Back in before all this new equipment and technology came out. And 2, how well did those guys know the city?
Well, I think everybody knew it pretty well, and of course you could always drive towards the smoke. But the thing is that response times, you know, a lot of it depended on the equipment. You know, it didn't go like it goes today. We did have Ford's Truck Company. You know, we lost a lot of companies over the years. Two's engine is gone. Ford's Station 9's gone. Ford's Truck Company. Ford's Truck Company was the workhorse of the town. Three's Truck Company, they were straight trucks. And then you had the aerial ladders, so you had three truck companies. But response time, I think they wanted you to be there in 4 minutes, but I think it was closer to 8 or 10.
Yeah.
Because just by the nature of the beast, I can remember when I first started chasing fires, the mechanical apparatus was chain driven. They'd only go so fast.
Wow.
And they made a hell of a lot of noise.
I think it was American. It was an American LaFrance. I think it was the last company that made chain driven. They were so traditional that they were the last company to make chain driven apparatus.
And boy, I'll tell you, Ford's engine was a chain driven engine, and you could hear it coming. You didn't need to hear the siren. You could hear the chain banging around down there. But I think 1414 Nebraska was a really good location. The building's still there, and that straight truck was a workhorse.
Yeah.
One thing you didn't talk about is me jumping in the net.
Yeah, let's
Yeah,
talk,
we
let's
can
talk
talk
about
about
that
the
one.
net,
Yeah.
yeah.
That was Sid Skidmore's idea. He used to have a lot of ideas that were kind of, you know, when you look at them today, they would have really frowned on. One, you had to, as part of your probation, they stack a 40-foot ladder for a church stack in the back of threes, old threes.
So a church stack, if people aren't familiar with that term, so a church stack is when he says a 40-foot ladder, and he means a 40-foot ladder standing straight up in the air. And a church stack, you would have basically ropes tied off to the top of the ladder and 4 points. Guys would hold the ladder in 4 points around on the ground. So basically, it's the ladder straight up in the air, and it's just being held there by the ropes, and guys just pulling tension from different directions. That's a church
And you
stack.
had to climb up the ladder, go over the top and down the other side. Well,
It's got a whole lot of nope written all over it. Oof.
It got its name because they would go out to churches and change the light bulbs for them.
Mhm.
And I can't imagine doing that today. But then, so they go through the, as they call them, the evolutions. The training consisted of a whole bunch of books that they got from Oklahoma, one of the universities. And you would go through, it was about the size of a Better Homes Garden magazine. And one would be on ropes, one would be on hoses, one would be on ladders, one would be on forcible entry, and one on first aid. And those were that was the training. They'd hand it to you, you'd read it, and then the drill masters, they call them, would come in and ask you questions. And, but anyway, they were down there going through evolutions, and I was shooting some movie film for them. And so we decided to get that, what they call them, Vanguard net off one of the rigs, and the guys would hold it. And Skidmore decided, he says, tell you what, he said, would you mind jumping in it to me? And I said, no, I'll jump in. And so I had a Bell and Howell camera. And so we went up, and we were talking about going up on the fourth top deck of that drill tower and jumping off that. And I said, I don't want to do that. I said, I got to crawl over the railing. I don't want to do that. So I said, I'll jump out the door up there on third. So, okay. So they get out there, and they're screwing around with it, you know, holding. So, and we're looking out, and boy, it looks a lot further down. Looking out. So he says, well, maybe we ought to check it first, because he says they haven't used it in years. And I said, I don't know if they've ever used them. So there was a roll of 2-inch line up there, hose up there. So we'll throw it in and see how it happens. Went right through it. I mean, it didn't even slow down. I mean, it was like right through into the ground. He says, oh, maybe we shouldn't do that. And I said, I don't think we're going to do that. But that was how the training stuff went. There was training, but it was, you know, woefully inadequate. But nobody at the time knew it. I mean, they thought it's just state of the nation, you know. Yeah, they had fun. You know, and sliding poles. I mean, you know, there were a lot of injuries of people sliding, and people get up at night to go to the bathroom and fall through the pole hole. The other thing you had to be careful of is there were doors on the bottom of the hole, and they keep the cold from coming up. But those doors would spring back, and they clipped a couple guys on the head and knocked them right off the pole, and you know, hitting the concrete. Not too good. One guy was seriously hurt down at Ones. He hit the tailboard when he went down, and that would not.
I
be
think
good.
wasn't Paul Snyder? Didn't he break like both ankles sliding like on probation? Like broke? Yeah, Paulie. Didn't he break like both ankles sliding a pole on probation and still like healed up and went on to have a career?
Well, they usually you know, after a while. First, they took the couplings off and wrapped it around so there would be a pad so that you hit that, but that's like hitting a rock. And then they eventually came out with rubber bumpers. But I don't know if we ever went to the rubber bumpers.
Because we at Ford, so we have the only station with a pole in it.
Right.
And I mean, it's more of a museum piece more than a functional thing. You know, it's out of old Station 1. So the pole's 100 years old. We do have. And actually, the pad we have at the bottom of it came out of old 3s.
Okay.
We got it from when Firehouse, when Polly bought Firehouse Bar, they had that stuff, the old Station 3 Turner Firehouse. He had some of the stuff still in storage, and one day we went down there with Kogel and stuff and asked about them, and he still had them. He said, "Yeah, no, I got these things." So it's the pad from old 3s on it, and yeah, it's just that thing. It's hard rubber though. I mean, it's very little cushion on that. Yeah, I could see a guy zip down those 2 stories with. Wet pants or just not having a good grip on there. And
well, they always
pick up some speed.
Were careful when kids would come in and tour the firehouse. Number one, that they wouldn't jump through the hole, but otherwise they'd reach up and grab the pole with their hands, bare hands, and the grease would get on it, and that would knock you off there too if you weren't careful.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about like they used to feed the horses on Thursdays. Well, we still, the majority of us, still do scrub out on Thursdays because that's we're steeped in tradition here in Sioux City, and we still have the pole ladders. No church climb anymore, thank God. But we still have the 40 and 45 foot ladders, and you're talking about the poles. You guys still brasso it every?
Every now and again it gets brasso, but that was a ton of brasso and elbow grease that went in because thing was as black as this tablecloth about when we put it in the station. So I mean, to get it, I mean it's never it sat in storage for so long it's got scratches. It'll never be a mirror finish, polished up like it would have been back in the day.
There used to be
it's better than it used to.
Storage room down at Ones that had a lot of stuff in it that over the years kind of got disappeared. A lot of trumpets.
Mm-hmm.
Oh wow!
And we had one guy that nailed most of those trumpets. And what he would do with them, they had a ornamental New York style fire helmet, silver on them, and a piece of cabling through it, that the guy would hold. And he wanted those little helmets off to make key rings out of, and he'd go in there and break them off. But so all those disappeared. I think I don't think there's any of those left. There are a lot of things that kind of grew legs.
Yeah, we'll get back to that because you have another story about Station 4. But I was going to ask you, do you know if I said the term pole lights, you know what that references to?
Which?
The pole lights.
Pole lights.
Pole lights. So that was Station 1. Our pole lights have been out. We've been getting them fixed. They're back up and running now. And everyone keeps using the term pole lights.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah, and we used them more in the last 2 weeks than we have in the last 10 years, I'm sure. So actually, Captain DeBont sent out an email about the history of the pole lights, and that was the lights. So you see the fire pole in the middle of the night. And for us, why are they called the pole lights?
Yeah.
And I thought it was pretty cool. Little, just the tradition that sticks around. Like the church stack. How to get its name? Well, the origins of that, and then it sticks around forever, and things just don't go away.
They had them. They had at one time those Pompier ladders, the ones you could hook on a windowsill.
We've got one at Ford's. I think it was a Sioux City one. It was one of Irving's pieces.
Okay.
That was the museum, but we have one at Ford's kind of set up. But yes, we have a Pompier ladder.
So we were talking just like tactic stuff the other day at Station 3, and rather than the Pompier ladder, I mean, we would use a roof ladder now, or with the hooks. to hook
but
the
essentially
windowsill.
kind
But
of
it's the same concept.
Yeah.
Well, the only problem with those is it would swing in against at the bottom.
building.
That's the thing you'd have to.
Gotcha.
Well, yeah, and you look at the little, I mean,
The pegs,
the pegs
my
on there
feet
and
aren't
stuff
fitting
like.
on those.
No, I mean it's
Yeah.
like you look. I mean it.
The
yeah,
best way
it's a
you
gorgeous
got
piece,
somebody
but
up that way is to get on the PA and just say, run. That's, but
Yep.
Yeah, that story from Station 4 about, was it the bell you got? You know, you talk about stuff getting
Oh, well,
acquired and going
I
missing
got
over
that
years.
out of,
And
it actually came out of Force, but it was sitting on the wharf deck down at One's down at 6 and Water. And they had traded in all the Gamewell stuff. Well, that was all the ticker stuff
That
and
was
all
the
the rest
ticker
of it. It was
stuff,
all laying out there. And I was down there looking it over, and a couple street boxes were there, and it was a whole bunch of junk. And Ed Hageman was chief, and I said, God, I'd sure like to have some of that stuff. And he says, yeah. He says, yeah, there's some pretty good stuff there. And I said, yeah, I'd like to have one of those bells. And he said, yeah. He says, well, he says, we're all going to be upstairs at a meeting 1 o'clock. And he says, there won't be down here. So I said, yeah, okay. And I kind of looked just. He said, yep, he says, everybody that's down here is going to be upstairs at a meeting at 1 o'clock. And I kind of clicked in, and I said, oh. And he said, see that door there? He says, that goes right out to the alley. He said, guy right there. So he said, we're all going upstairs now. And that was my clue. I grabbed that bell that you got down at Threes and the street box. But damn, I wish I'd have grabbed some more.
yeah.
I mean, it was this Gamewell probably threw it in a junk pile.
Well, we actually, because Buckley with the historical stuff has been looking at that and looking at those systems, because there is a fire museum, and I can't remember where we found a YouTube video, but that has a functioning Gamewell system just in their museum. So you go over to the pull box and you pull it, and it does the gongs, and then that ticker tape, which I didn't
Taps it
realize
out.
that it had, I knew the board came up and would do the things, the different gongs. I didn't realize that ticker tape was part of it, but yeah, then it would tick it out. And then there's also has another system where then it takes that and relays that to the other stations then from the main. It's just it's an amazing system. They have it all in a glass box so you can look and see all the moving
I don't think
parts.
there's a picture in
That's
my book
unreal.
of the central alarm room down here.
Mm-hmm.
But it was enormous. I mean,
This one right here, is that it?
yeah. Well, actually, it's the wall behind it is what
Wow.
you look at. I got that key at home.
Wow.
But
Then yeah, you'd read
Kenny
the
Snavy was he was
punches
on light
there, and then
duty.
it'd go to the board to the board, and then that would tell you which pull box, which would refer to an intersection. Still didn't give you an address.
No,
but yeah,
you're going to
it's-
that intersection
Yeah,
for that box.
then
alarm.
yeah, and then I don't know, look for the smoke or look for
Yeah.
the
That's
person
where they
standing there saying it's right here.
Put
Yeah.
the light duty guys. They'd worked the alarm room, and there was a guy by the name of Kenny Snavy. It was there for years, and he knew how that thing worked. I mean, he knew it intimately. He knew if it was light bulb out or something wasn't working. And that's what it took. I mean, you had to have a special breed of cat to be in that room, because when those alarms came in, it was all hell broke loose in there.
Yeah. Was there any other jobs that are obsolete now? You know, have been replaced by computers that were just a staple point of the fire department?
Oh, I don't know. They used to have a secretary. It was a guy, because everything was upstairs down there. The hell was his name? Murphy. And then they had, I was trying to think of the old headquarters down there, the chief, and Paul Dreves was up there. He was the fire marshal and then training officer. Everybody was training officer at one time or other. And then they had a quarters upstairs for the assistant chief. And his driver slept downstairs. And they had a guy that had to be down there. If the AC cars went out, somebody had to man an office on the first floor in case the public came in and wanted something. And it had a Murphy bed so they could sleep down there. No, that's about it. They had the fire department mechanic. They had a mechanic in the early days. Now they got one again.
It's been a Great addition.
Oh, yeah.
Justin is.
God, yes.
Yeah.
And
Awesome.
the old boy, he had a pickup truck and had all the extra parts and tools and extra fuel, and he'd follow any four tapper. He'd be out there. Because the pump would break down or something, he'd magically fix it. What else do they have? That's about it.
Yeah.
They had two guys in the bureau. Phil Kemish was in there, and he was a captain. He was the character. He's the one that had the mulled wine. He's also the one that had a go-kart and was cleaning it with gasoline in his driveway and set himself on fire. But and then he had a lieutenant that had two daughters that were incredible. They were banned from the fire station. I mean, they essentially were banned from the fire station. Marv Kraft. And his two daughters could have been in the movies. So they were banned. Don't show up around it. And they used to have water fights routinely in the fire station.
Yeah.
And can't do that anymore. There was all kinds of crap that went on, that today they'd put you in jail.
Oh, you did listen to the stories, like talking to Rick Owl and the stories of old ones and all that, and like, yeah, the shenanigans and the things
Oh,
like it used
God.
to, like, you're like, oh man, yeah, there's probably, I mean, I'm sure there's rules in our APs and stuff that pertain to,
Yeah.
we always say that that's so and so's rule and that's so and so's rule and stuff like, but yeah, the stories of those the old ones and everything that it's. Yeah,
Well, they were always tearing the doors off the rigs when they had the doors opened up.
Mm-hmm.
And they put light, and they had named after one of the firemen that tore more doors off than anybody. And they had a light so that if one of those doors was open, there would be a red light on the dash, and they'd know to
Yeah.
close it.
That's funny how certain things get their names from certain guys
Yeah.
on the job that
Yeah.
have been on the job.
That happens. We're always leaving doors open
Yeah.
still.
They had a civil defense rescue truck one time that they tried to keep in there. It was huge. God, it was huge. It was a Rio. They never used it. But the feds gave them one. They gave everybody one. And so they had that one down there. And so the fire department got tired of it. It was just taking up too much room. So they decided to put it in the basement of the police station. It had a ramp that went down the old police station, and it was a garage down. Well, they thought they'd get a good run at it and take her down the ramp, and by God, they wedged it in there. And I mean, they wedged it in there. They wedged it in there. It was wedged in there for 2 days until they could finally pull it out with a couple wreckers. There were things, like the police department and the fire department were always fighting because the police would be making too much noise and the guys couldn't sleep, and they had a gun range in the basement of the police station. They go down there and shoot at night. And of course, the guys would want to sleep, and they'd be down there shooting, and they'd be banging on the walls and screaming at each other. There were things like that really put the flavor into the fire service, and unfortunately, all that stuff is gone, maybe for the best.
Yeah.
But
But as you tell some of these stories, it's, you hear it and you just like, I could, if this was today, I already know the character doing this. And
Oh, yeah.
I already know the character. I know what person
who
I
would
work
be doing
with
the same thing?
doing the same thing. So the more things change, really, the more they stay the same. It's
Well,
just the
Ford-
toys are different. And
Fours, there were stories about fours that we shall not put on tape. But the things that would happen up there they're very unsavory.
I can only imagine.
You'd be surprised how fast some guys can run, especially if they're down the street in a different house and the alarm goes off.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And the windows are all open in the fire station, so you would hear the gong. And you wouldn't want to be in that alley between 14th and 15th on Nebraska. You could be trampled. There was, all kinds of that stuff.
George, go man the station. We're going to be out for a little bit. Huh?
Exactly, yeah. Or, yeah.
That station, that building, that 1414 Nebraska Street, that is, I wish I wish I could have seen it when it was still a firehouse because I haven't
still
been through
looks
it
like a
now.
firehouse,
Well, and
right?
haven't been through it now, inspecting it. So the downstairs kind of got a remodel because of different business moved in, but the upstairs is still, for the most part, untouched. A couple little things here and there, but the old floorboards are still there. A lot of the old stuff where you can see, where things used to be. Oh man, I just feel like there's so much history in that building.
Well,
it's
yeah,
it's
there
a
was
really, really cool building.
There was a hose tower in there where you had to dry the hose, you had to pull it up and dry it. And then that's probably still intact. And then I think if you pull that ceiling, you can still see where the horse equipment was hung.
Well, the I don't know what you want to call it, the brace for the come along and stuff to pull the hay up.
Right,
That's still
it's
off
still
the back
there.
of the building and stuff. That's still there.
Then when they moved out of there was a roll top desk that had been up there since day one, and nobody wanted to move it down the stairs, and they threw it out the back window. They busted it up and threw it out the window. Stuff like that, you look back and went, oh God,
Yeah.
that stuff would probably worth $10,000 today if you had it. But that rack in the back, the floor slope, and that's where they wash the hose and then haul it over and pull it up in the
That's
tower.
as the service has evolved, the chores that used to be, weekly, daily activities that are now obsolete. Like we don't hang hose for every now and then. It's like, oh, we'll hang that piece or something. But state, you're talking about all the the stories. Some you can't say, maybe some you can. But like Station 3 was, old Station 3 used to be down where
Yeah.
nightlife was
Oh yeah.
was there. You have any stories from that?
No, I was.
that you can share.
Well, I
Or
never
maybe-
hung around threes that much, other than when they were trying to kill me jumping out of the tower. But I hung around fours a lot.
Yeah.
And down at ones, I was down there a lot.
Any favorite stations?
Always fours.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was cool.
Kind of your hometown station there.
I
the
guess
later-
it was
yeah.
just a neighborhood station, and
Yeah.
everybody kind of hung around.
Yeah.
One of the best PR that the fire department ever has when they had a bench out in front, and the firemen would sit out there at night because all the kids in the neighborhood would go by, and adults and everybody would go by. But that really set up a relationship with the neighborhood. And even after I started working in TV and stuff, go hang around the fire station. They knew what everything was going on in town. It may not have anything to do with the fire department at all, but there was always a rumor mill going, and you could always pick up on stuff. And it's still that way, I'm sure. But news people don't show up. I mean, they wouldn't know enough to do it. If you drove the picture, they wouldn't know enough to do it. But I've talked to a lot of them. I said, who's your contact? What are you talking about contact? Do you know somebody? And, well, no, why would I know them? I said, well, don't you ever get off your ass and go out and talk to people? No, we really don't. Don't have time. Well, yeah, you do. That's your job.
Yeah.
You go out and you make contacts, and when something happens, somebody will call you or somebody will let you know. They might not come right out face to face with you and tell you that, so-and-so just ran off with so-and-so's wife, but they'll, tell you something down the line so that something's up over there. But they don't do that anymore. That's part of what's wrong with society. There's that face-to-face is over with.
Yeah.
Hey, there are people right now, I know a couple here in town, if they get in an argument, they'll sit and talk to each other on Facebook, but they won't.
Talk to each other in person.
Yeah.
I
And
think
people don't understand that what you put down there is down. I mean, I've been in enough trial situations where they dig up stuff you thought, oh God, did I say that? And did somebody actually record it? And
Yeah.
these lawyers can get a hold of it right and left, and they do. It's like at one time here we had a police car that had 5 cameras on it, and it would read every license number as it drove down the street. And the idea is that it was a wanted car or something that would come up on the computer. Well, the city of Sioux still has one sitting out Central Maintenance Garage, but it didn't. But the system got into the courts, and people found out that those license numbers that we were reading were going back to this company in Australia, and they were selling it to, like, you could call up and say, I have a license number, and give them the number. And for $75, they tell you where that car was. I mean, where it went,
Yeah.
the time, because it was recording all of it. And Canada is the one that started it. They wanted to put them in the Canadian police, and Canada won't allow even let them demonstrate one out there because of it's, violating your rights. But any information you record or put down or whatever, somebody will sell it,
Sure.
and that's not good.
Yeah, it's not going away either.
No,
One more question for you, George. A lot more fires back in the day, or is it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
well, yeah, oh my God, yes. Because that's partially because inspection, I think, building materials. People are a little bit more conscientious, I think. Still, they do crazy things. I think the biggest threat right now is homeless people going into properties and things, and they got to be someplace.
Yeah, that's been our last few weeks.
Yeah, and you can't. It's not a crime to be poor, and it's not a crime to be homeless. But on the other hand, I think we need to address that problem and do something about it. And I don't know what it is, and I don't know how you do it, because a lot of people, even if they were given the opportunity, they don't want the opportunity. They don't want to live inside, but they need some place to be. And I think that is something we better get a hold of, especially in Sioux City, because we're not that big a town, and we're overrun with homeless people.
Yeah,
And
I will
mentally
say-
handicapped people.
I will say our compared to other bigger, to me, my hometown's 8,500 people.
Sure.
So Sioux City's a big city. To me, it's a big city. But when you go to, a bigger city, whether it's Nashville, Minneapolis, Las Vegas, whatever, I will say, like, I do think our homeless population, people might not notice them as much because, especially at night, they seem to find someplace. You don't see them sleeping on business doorsteps or grates that are on the ground where steam are coming up. You don't just see them piled up everywhere. I mean, if you know where to look, you see it, but they kind of hide away versus some of these other big cities where they just set up a camp, find a patch of grass, and you have a camp of 30 of them just right in the middle of town, or they're just sleeping everywhere. So I will say, like, we do have a population, but I don't think people see them as much. It's what we do on our end when we're responding to a lot of these calls and different things. So.
Yeah, I worry places like the warming shelter catching fire or something like that. That's going to be a disaster. But, I brought these with me. We were talking about the fire department apparel. These are what they used to give everybody.
Those are like the tick mitts, are they?
Tick
those
mitts.
Tick mitts.
And the thing is, this is all you were allowed to wear. You can't wear gloves.
Wow.
And the problem was where they get wet and they would get hard. And the idea was to carry as many of these as you can. So every firefighter had his pockets full of these. And they carried extra ones on the rigs, because once they got hard, frozen, throw them away, because they just didn't work anymore. But yeah, this and a rubber coat and a blue denim farm jacket, they called them, underneath, and a helmet, and then they gave you a pair of hip boots, pull-up boots. But then you had to buy your own steel insole for them, and you had to have them because if you stepped on a board with a nail in it, it was going to go right in your foot. So you'd buy these steel inserts and put on. But and I think you got $200 a year clothing allowance.
Which
For
actually,
people
back in the
listening,
day,
George
yes.
has a pair of oven mitts basically in his hands,
Yeah,
and that's what
that's-
the guys were issued.
Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly. That's what it was.
And I mean,
and they
nice
stamped
blue
them. They were
stripes
proud.
and
The
everything.
fire department
Yep,
stamped.
SCFD
These
right
came from, what was his name? One of the assistant chiefs gave them to me. He said,
Yeah, I
piece of
remember like some of the
memorabilia.
guys always thought, some of the older guys when I came on even and stuff talking about the old
tick
the old
mitts,
tick mitts.
yeah.
Yep, the old tick mitts. George, is there like a favorite, maybe not the most famous picture you've taken, but like your most favorite or like top 3 most favorite pictures that you've ever taken? Can you be like, you know what, this this picture that I took is really special, or
No, I can't think of anything that's that special. I mean, a lot of them were hard There were a lot of them that were very complicated. When we did the gateway ads, some of those things were
Who
pretty...
took did you guys do the one with on the pirate ship, on the sailing ship? Who did that?
Oh, yes, we did.
That was your picture?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it's been popping up in like one of these like back in the.
We shot it in
remember the
Hollywood.
'90s like things in my Facebook is popping up with Gateway Computers, and it's on a it's on a sailboat, thing and stuff. So yeah.
Well, what happened on that one was that was shot in Hollywood. We shot it out there. And we got to talking about doing this concept of sailing the rough seas of buying by mail. And we came up with the idea to do it on a pirate ship. So we started looking for a pirate ship we could rent. Well, there were 2 or 3 of them in L.A. One of them belonged to Walt Disney's company. And they said, yeah, they'll rent it to us. So we went out and looked at them, and none of them would really work. So there was a guy, he originally lived in Kearney, Nebraska. Can't remember his name. He was the guy that built the sets for the Academy Awards. And so we got a hold of him, Keaton Walker. And we said, this is what we want to do. And so I flew out there on a Thursday, met with him and an understudy he had. They brought us a bunch of books and stuff, and we looked at them. And I said, that's what I want. I need half a ship. So he said, as they do in Hollywood, he said, how soon do you need it? I said, it shoots Tuesday. And this was Thursday. And we had a early morning meeting on Friday. He says, I'm doing the new Academy Award set at this particular studio. He said, we can build it in the studio. There's enough space. And I've never seen anything like it in my life. They went in there. They came up with the concept. This young understudy has came up with the design for it in a matter of hours. And so we went in there, and we were laying out what we were going to do. And Keaton says, but we got to put it in water. And I said, how are we going to do that? And he says, we're going to build a pond. And they did. They fabricated a pond, and that's actually sitting in water. And I called back to Sioux City, and I said, this is what's going on. And so Luann grabbed a bunch of people, and people from Gateway, and Ted, and all of them. And they said, go full bore. So we had to, Luann flew out there. She was out there right away. So we had to get costumes for all those people. So we called Western Costume, said, this is what we need. They said, okay, we'll start pulling costumes. We called Central Casting and said, we need this and this and this for people. They said, okay, we'll have pictures laid out. So at 3 o'clock, it had been Saturday morning, we go to Central Casting, and they got pictures laying out on a table. We picked out the people. We said, that one, that one, that one, that one. They said, well, don't go away. We're going to call them and see if they're available. And they're calling them in the middle of the night. Yeah, they were available. So we get everything going. They send a plane out with the computers on it, get everything ready to go. Ted flies out. So Tuesday morning, we're ready to shoot. And the cast came in. The one guy walks in. We had to have the computers flown out, and they're in the Gateway Cowpatch boxes. And this one guy walks in, and everybody thought it was milk products.
Because of the cow. There's a cow print on there.
And the one guy walks in, and he says, Gateway. And I said, how do you know Gateway? And he says, I used to work for FedEx in Sioux City. He says, I know.
Wow.
Jeez.
So that was small world. But yeah, so we got it shot. The rigging, all the rope on that came out of Dorothy Chandler Theater because Keaton, who was building the set for the Academy Awards, they had new rope, and he says, that don't look right. We got to have old rope. So he called the Dorothy Chandler, says, take all that rigging down, all that rope, roll it up, bring it out here to wherever we're at. And he says, we're going to put new rope on all the rigging in the Dorothy Chandler. So we got the old rope, which we wanted, and they got the new. But I never watched people work like that in my life. They were building that. As one group was finishing, there was a group coming and painting it and aging the paint.
Wow.
And it was
Amazing.
it was like a symphony concert going on.
Cool.
Nobody was getting in anybody's way. That's when I found out the best job in Hollywood is the honey wagon driver. That's the restrooms. He got $4,000 a day for the use of his truck, and he never left the cab. Only on occasion he would get up and go in and spray some air freshener in where the people that use the restrooms, but
My goodness.
it was cash.
Wow.
I had to hand him cash. And I thought, that's the job.
That's the job.
You know, George, as we wrap things up here, you know, you hear all these stories with Sinatra and Kennedy and all that stuff, and then here you are chasing fire trucks in Sioux City, Iowa. Would you say?
Well, and now sitting on our podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
This
yeah.
is we're out
The
kicking our
ultimate.
coverage here.
Yeah.
Would you?
Joe Rogan never had George Lindblade, right?
Yeah,
You haven't
well,
been on
you-
Rogan's show?
You've probably been asked, but
No. But anyway,
you should.
do I ever look back and wish I was doing it again?
Yeah, I would say that, and then just would you say this is still your favorite thing to document and take photos
yeah,
of and
yeah.
videos? And,
Yeah, and people look back and say, well, you know, why would you ever leave that? It's changed. You can
Yeah.
never do what I did, and nobody could
Yeah.
today because number one, there's too much red tape. There's too much crap. There's everybody wants to sue you, and you have to have the contacts. You have to have the inside track. I didn't do anything because I was, like I told everybody, I was not that great a technician, but I just happened to know the right people, and the right people were shoving me in there, shoving me in there. Today, anybody would be afraid to do half the stuff I did. I watched a show last night that was about the mafia, and I've shot a lot of those people. And the thing is that, and that's because we were doing work for IVP, which kind of had a connection, and they would send me into New York to take pictures of stuff. And I knew who I was dealing with, Mo Steinman, and a few of those people.
Wow.
Yeah. The thing is that there was a guy over here running a company called CP Sales. You would want him for your neighbor. Nicest looking guy you ever want to meet. Nice guy, quiet, easygoing. I had to go and do a portrait of him one day over Dakota City. And then I read in, there's a book called, what's it called? It was written by a guy from the Wall Street Journal. He sent 7 guys to the East River. You want to buy our product? Bang. And but he was one of those kinds, like I said, he was like a choir boy. And he was a Jewish kid. And when I took the picture of it, he called me one day, and I thought, oh, God. Because at the time I knew he was connected, but I didn't know how connected. He wanted pictures sent to his mother, and because he was going to be the B'nai B'rith Man of the Year. And I thought, well, that's all right. So I sent the pictures, but then afterwards you find out who this guy was. I
Yeah.
mean, God, if you didn't like him, you'd probably find yourself in a meat grinder someplace. But and then Mo Steinman, who was one of the big, one of the 5 big families in New York, he was strange. He'd come out here for board meetings, and you just had a feeling when you're around him. Don't get near him and don't talk to him. You could, you could shake your head or say good morning or something, and he'd answer you. But he had that look. You just don't go near this guy. I mean, it's like, don't go near him.
yeah.
And he never said a lot. He probably said a lot behind closed doors, but
I'm
he
sure.
didn't say crap when he was out. You know, he would line them all up and take the picture. And one time they sent me in there to photograph some processes that were going on, and they said it was on 14th Street in New York. And they said there'll be some people meet you at a plane, and they'll take you out, show you what they want the picture of. So I thought, oh, I don't like this. So anyway, they sent me in. These 2 guys meet me, and of course that's after I'd come back to California, and I was around enough of those birds out there that I knew who they were. So they took me out. We took the pictures, and they said, "Is there anything else you want?" And I said, "Oh, I'd like to go in that joint and get some pictures in there." And they said, "Let's go." So we walk in, and these guys are all doing their thing. And they look up, and they see these 2 dudes stand behind, and they go right back to doing what they're doing. They say, "Go ahead, take all the pictures you want." So I went and took the pictures. They walked out of there, and they said, "Anything else?" I said, "Nope." And they said, "You want to go have lunch?" And I said, "No, I better get back," because they had a plane waiting for me. And they said, "Oh, well, we got time for lunch." I said, "No, I think I should go back right away." I want out of here. But yeah, there's moments like that you remember.
Yeah,
But,
and we keep digging into another story. we'll have, if you'd like, we'd love to have you back on again real soon and tell
Whatever.
more of them. I have a feeling we're just scratching the surface of
Yeah,
you know,
whatever.
most of this stuff. You lived in you're an incredible life and seen so much and so many.
Oh, yeah.
I really don't know if there's an individual that's just seen and done as much.
Well,
You know, for all the stuff that
Yeah,
George has done with
the lens
movies
that
or
you
seen in
have.
movies, how come there isn't a George Lindblade movie?
There's Iowa Public Broadcast is trying to do one, and I don't know how lucky they'll be because you can't put this stuff
Oh
together.
no, there's
But
too
you know,
much.
if you read Clicks, that's the other book of mine. You know, when I was, everybody says, why didn't you be a fireman? Well, number one, I couldn't be a fireman because when I was born with all my insides outside.
Okay.
And they had to put me all back together. But I wasn't going to live, so they autopsy stitched me up.
Yep.
And
Here you are.
Yeah, and here I am. But it took 92 drops of ether to knock me out
Wow.
when I was 12 hours old.
Yeah.
Well, that screwed up my lungs because
Yep.
I always had asthma. And so, I mean, I could never do it. But then I got to thinking a while back, I got drafted.
Mhm.
And I went in for the physical, and this old doctor looked at me and he said, well, what the hell's wrong with you? Did you have your spleen taken out? And I said, no, and I started to explain it to him. And he turned around to these other two young doctors and he says, the damn Russians overrun in this country, why are they sending people like that in here? Get out of here. So that was the end of that. 2 weeks later, I was at a military base running with over 65 pounds of equipment, shooting other people, doing stuff that I wasn't supposed to be able to do. And I'm thinking, I hope nobody recognizes me. But, you know, so that's why I didn't do it. That's why I probably would have.
And in a way, you did do it.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I mean, all
Yeah.
of, like the reasons you couldn't do the job, and
Yeah.
then you're telling stories about
Yeah.
going in without mask and.
Yeah. But
and
it was like, well, nobody told me I couldn't, so I'm doing it.
There you go.
yeah,
And
ask for forgiveness.
but that's the problem with kids today. They have to be trained. They have to have this. They have to. No, you don't. Just get off your butt and do it. You know, get in there and do it.
That's right.
But and you're going to get knocked on your ass. You're going to screw up. You're going to make mistakes. Go ahead and make them.
Yeah.
What the hell? Nobody's going to put you in jail for making a mistake unless you shoot somebody.
Yeah. You know, I wonder if there'll ever be a day where the adrenaline doesn't, you know, kick in, where you're just trying to make stuff happen because it's work and it's got to be done quick and it's got to be done now.
You can't, you know, that's what you try to convince people. I don't care how much simulation you do, you can't get the adrenaline rush.
No.
I mean, until you're into the thick of it, until somebody's, you know, because you can go through all these first aid drills you want, but until somebody's screaming, throwing up on you, peeing on you, fighting you.
Yeah.
Well, in simulations or training, there's always a stop button.
Yeah.
You know, if you
Yeah.
get to a point where everything's
Yeah.
just getting too much, you can always just say stop.
Yeah.
You know, and that's where you can't simulate that in real life. That there is no stop button.
There's no
that's
stop.
where you can't simulate that because no matter what.
That's unfortunate that we can't, you know,
Yeah.
we can't do the most real simulations like back when you were around when they were training.
Yeah.
they'd burn houses.
Absolutely.
They'd
Yeah.
train burn. We can't do that anymore.
Well, that was
Well-
because of urban renewal.
Well, wasn't there? And again, we keep going and going, but wasn't there? There was a training fire though that you did kind of get caught in a little bit.
Oh, well, that was a Christmas tree fire.
Yeah.
That was out on Hamilton Boulevard, right there by Perry Creek, and they wanted to show the problem with Christmas trees burning and not closing your bedroom door.
Which we actually talked about it on our last podcast. That was Christmas tree safety. And
Yeah.
stuff,
So anyway, they set up the tree at the bottom of the steps, and Phil Kemish, the fire marshal, and I went upstairs, and he always wore a Class A uniform every day. So he's up there in his long winter coat, and we're up there, and we had him start the fire, and smoke came up, you know, when we closed the door, and hell, that's no good. We got some fire coming up here. So opened the door, and Kemish was yelling at him. So there was a joint selling Christmas trees right there. So they went over and they had some bales of hay that they'd stuck Christmas trees. Got a bale of hay, brought the hay over, pulled it all apart, put it underneath the Christmas tree and let it off. Well, there's about this much snow on the porch roof. And so they get it going, and they get it going, and I'm up there filming it with 16 millimeter film. And Kemi slams the door, and the damn door blows open. It's just about as fast as he shut it. and we dive out that window. And so we're sitting out on the window in this ice and snow yelling at fours to get a ladder because the fire's coming right out the window behind us. And we got our butt out of there, but Kemish was yelling and screaming about it. What the hell did you think we were doing up there? You know, God damn it, has anybody got any water? You know. So, but anyway, you know, you can do things like that, and but when I look at these shows now that they put up at Christmas time of the tree burning, you know, all that crap, I go, ain't the way it is.
Ain't the way it is.
When she kicks loose, and you better be moving. Because
That's yeah. I thought you were talking about the ladders, and I really hope anyone listening doesn't think like we're beating up that crew because
no.
When we were on probation, Deb, you tested this. Like we had think of the ladder commands, and you have like your set and pivot and all. I don't think there's ever been a fire where that happens.
No.
It's usually the driver by himself throwing a ladder way bigger than he should be throwing.
Well, he grabs.
While he's doing like 6 other things at the same
So
time.
it's throw a ladder to get it out there in case they need
just
it.
like that.
Exactly.
Fire,
Just did it the other
it's
night.
like, it was
Yeah.
just Douglas Street.
Exactly.
Shipper was
It's
running
just-
around throwing ladders every which direction,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
we had guys upstairs and downstairs and
Like
Yeah.
George said, we do a lot with a little amount of guys and
Yeah.
a little
Oh,
amount of
you do?
equipment because
Yeah.
you have to.
And
just have to.
you know, I can see that you're running. You grab the top rung and you don't care what the hell it is. Let's get it up there. You know?
Yeah.
And that happens. And it's Monday morning quarterback, and you stand there and go, why'd I do that? But you'd probably do the same thing
Yep.
that afternoon if
Yeah.
you came the same circumstance.
Yeah.
Because everything you do is circumstance
That's right.
initiated.
well, I think our medics, the critical thinking that's involved
Oh.
anymore with
Split
pre-hospital, that with the medications that they have and the abilities that they have to be able to paralyze people and put tubes in their throats to help them breathe, and shocking and starting people's hearts again and all this stuff, and having the ability to do it with our guidelines or protocols, but the critical thinking and the wherewithal to you make
Absolutely.
the decision right there on the scene in somebody's house, like you said, not the doctor's office where you're
Right.
in a or in the ER and stuff where it's a semi-controlled environment, climate-controlled environment. All the equipment you need is within arm's reach, and you have space to work. I think people don't see that on as far as our EMS side of responses is what the paramedics and stuff and what we're capable of doing. As first, pre-hospital, first people on scene.
Well, over in eastern Iowa, they had to do an amputation. 2 paramedics and a surgical team.
That's right.
They came out of Iowa City.
Yep.
But they did an amputation on a guy caught in a conveyor belt, and they were underground. It was a subterranean type thing. Thank God there were 2 doctors at the University of Iowa Hospital that went out there, because I'll guarantee you got 2 doctors from St. Luke's or Mercy Medical. I'm doing that, You get them up here, I'll take care of them,
Yeah.
And and you can't blame anybody. We live in a litigious society that everybody's looking for the quick buck. And like Shakespeare said, get rid of the lawyers, and they should. I mean, because that's what's driving it all. And they're looking for anything. That's the society we live in, and I guess till somebody comes up with something different, we're stuck.
It'll keep going. So, George, like I said, we probably keep going. I think probably put a lid on it for now. We'll have you back later from the department and our podcast. Thank you so much for coming on today. Thank you for everything you've done for the Sioux City Fire Department. I'm sure everyone that we work with would say the same thing. All the chiefs, Chief Everett. We truly are humbled to have you. And if you weren't around doing it,
Glad
I
to
don't
do
know
it.
if how many of these stories would be around
Well,
and how
it's-
much stuff we'd be able to talk about and point to at photos.
You probably won't be able to use half this, but
I said
put up
before,
the national anthem and
what's the hard thing with George is there is no replacing George.
No.
There isn't.
Never
Whether
will
it's
be.
Sioux City, whether it's our fire department history, whether it's Sioux City history,
Yeah.
this area, George has meant so much and means so much. But there is no replacing it. There is nobody waiting in the wings. There is when someday when George is God and looking down on us from above, I think there's a big part of our history going forward that's going to get lost because there is no other George.
There'll
People
be
talk
some-
about that. They'll be like, who will
Yeah.
will do your job. You know,
Yeah.
if
Nobody
there comes
as
a day
well
where
as
you don't
you,
want to
that's
do it
no.
anymore.
They're all
can't do it
smarter
anymore.
than I am.
Yeah, I
They're
don't
doing
think
other
so.
things.
Doing other things.
I wonder how that'll evolve. You know, a lot of the other departments they have a paid PR guy or,
Oh, yeah.
or personnel that's their job to take these photos, and we've been just so lucky to have you.
Yeah.
Well, Sioux City is the police department's trying to do it now, and they told a couple of them that they want them to do what I do for you guys. But
It's an art, right?
It's a
It's an
commitment.
art.
It's
And
an
I don't
art. It's a
think,
commitment. It's a you have to have it's a passion. It's
Absolutely.
everything. You know,
You got to
It's-
be driven to it.
You got to
for
have
sure.
all of it.
How many people sleep? Well, I can tell you a real quick story about how that goes. When I got married out in California, we were going to a place up in Hemet for a honeymoon. And so her and I are headed to Hemet for the honeymoon. And so we're going up, the forest fire trucks are going by, passing us. And we had made reservations at this place, so I took her there, and I said, I got to call Burbank. That's where NBC was. And I called them, and I said, hey, I'm up here at Hammond. I said, a lot of forest fire vehicles moving. They said, yeah, can you get to Ryan Field? And I said, yeah, I don't think it's that far from here. And they said, you got any equipment with you? And I said, yeah, I got it in the trunk. They said, get over to Ryan Field right away. And they said, we'll get in touch with you. I said, okay. So I said to her, hey, I got a quickie. I got to go over to Ryan Field. And she said, for what? And I said, I don't know. I just talked to Burbank, and they want me to go. Well, 3 days later, I knew it was on a downhill slope. Yeah, that's how that went. That's the story of my life.
There you go.
So you gotta have passion.
Yeah.
Anything you do, whatever it is.
Either that or be a little deficient something.
Well, there's a lot of that running around.
Well,
around
thanks
here.
for
All
being
right.
that way, George. Thank you for coming.
Yep,
Thank you very much, George.
anytime.
From everyone. Thank you.
Yeah.
Glad to do it.
Thanks,
Perfect.
George.
Let me know when you need something else.
We
Good.
will.
I'm sure we will.
Or I'll see you at the next fire.
That's
Yeah.
right. See ya.
See you, George.
Be careful.
All right. I think that wraps it up. Ryan, you want to drop the tones? How can I make our podcast better? All right, welcome back, everyone, to the new and improved episode of the Before the Tones Drop podcast. I'm your host, Ben Moorhead. With me is my co-host, Ben Moorhead. Ben, how you doing? Hey, it's good to be here. Just got back from LA. Always nice to be back in Sioux City. Awesome. Thanks for joining me. Let's welcome our guest. Guys, everyone today, our guest, I'm really excited about him. Ben Moorhead. Ben, welcome to the show. Hey, thanks for having me today, guys. Just got off tour in Miami. It's good to be back. Love the new setup. Love the new host. Love the new co-host. Don't think it could be any better.